Awesome.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Cover to Cover. We have had a bit of a break. I have been moving, and I am currently still not done moving. We are in my new kitchen, as my studio and office is not done yet. But we'll get there eventually. I'm super glad to be back. Um, Tonight we're not specifically talking about a particular game. Instead, we're going to be talking about gaming in general with a friend of mine who has quite a bit of experience with education and has set up a gaming club at her own school. She is a teacher um, at high school level. And I will shut up for a moment and allow Linda to introduce herself. Hi, Linda. Can you
Hey,
introduce
JZ.
yourself?
My name is Linda Detwiler. I'm a chemistry and physics teacher in Western Kentucky. I do work with the big kids, so I teach sophomores through seniors. Though occasionally, a little freshman will sneak their way into chemistry or physics, and I'll have the joys of teaching them for a very long, long time. I do also run our after-school programs, Dungeons and Dragons, and Magic the Gathering Club, and I've been doing that for 3 years now.
Wonderful. By the way, tonight, on top of our usual talking about tabletop gaming, D&D, and the like, we are adding in some Magic the Gathering tonight. Kind of a new thing. I know I've played a lot on stream, but we haven't brought it into cover to cover. But tonight is special because we are doing a charity stream for Magic Kids. You really need to check this group out. They do a lot of great work in helping kids and young people start these kind of clubs and get into a new hobby that can be productive and educational and helpful to them by supplying them with cards and helping them understand the rules of the game and getting their foot in the door of that community. Um, Not only do they accept monetary donations, they accept donations of bulk card stock. I'm actually getting ready to send them a few thousand cards myself. I'm going to put that up on Twitter and YouTube and stuff just so you can see how it's done. But tonight is a charity stream. Type in parentheses donate to get a link to my PayPal, and I will get that money to them tomorrow. I'm really excited about it. I'll be accepting donations all week for Magic Kids, but I think they're a great group, and they very well hit the nail on the head for the kind of ethos I'm going for with this channel. That one of the problems in our gaming community is gatekeeping, and sometimes it can be hard for people to get their foot in the door, and to realize that there's other things besides D&D. This is a group that helps with things like that, and so let's show them some love tonight. Thank you for joining in. I believe Magic Kids may be in the chat, and if they are, awesome. If not, I hope to see you guys later. But I also hope to see you guys at Magic Fest. I haven't seen you guys since Atlanta, and I'm looking forward to it. I want to play some Oathbreaker. Linda, I know you play Magic as well. Have you played
Yeah,
Oathbreaker?
no, I haven't. I've been playing Magic since 2009.
Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds right. 2009.
you
Gosh,
have
11.
way more experience in it than me, to be honest.
I I traveled the country playing Magic. Fun fact: when I was in college, that's how I paid my bills. Was playing Magic at like a semi-competitive level. My prize support got sold to pay the electric and pay the water bill, and it actually like sustained me for quite a while. It was buying and selling Magic cards and like just doing those events, and I loved it. I still have a very strong place for Magic in my heart. I was a level 1 judge for a couple of years and got out of that when I came out to Kentucky, so it's it's been an interesting experience.
Let's put a little Linda icon in the chat window. There we go. We don't have a Linda, but we can have an L that makes little ripples when Linda talks.
There we go. Yeah. I was telling Casey, my office is also the laundry room, is also the guest bedroom, is also where my son piles all of his toys. There are war zones that probably look in better shape than this room. So
Oh man.
uh, it's cringy at best. Um,
So Linda, I know we've played D&D together on multiple occasions in different games. Are you familiar with any other tabletop games other than D&D? Have you tried any?
I did Pathfinder when I was in college. I was telling you about one before the stream. I did with I can't even remember the name of it. It was done with colored chips, and you pull a chip out of the bag to dictate whether or not you move forward. I did Shadowrun. I actually started in 3.5 back in college. I remember second edition at some point in my life when I was like really young. That was like my first introduction to Dungeons and Dragons.
Hmm.
Um, I'm sure I've done some other like I've done homebrew games, and I tried really hard to do the Pokemon universe roleplay game, and I just haven't quite managed to like put together a campaign for it. The campaign I run right
Yeah.
now is in.
We really should have planned that one. I think we're going to talk a little bit about Hero Kids if we have time, but I really should
Yeah,
have planned for us to talk about Pokemon United because I know that's your jam.
it
Um,
is an awesome one, and it's free.
that
Like,
is, yeah, it is. And that one's on our
yeah,
list for Friday night playtest eventually. Right now we're playing Kids on Bikes. I think next we're going to play Masks powered by the Apocalypse, but we will add Pokemon United to that list as well. For
yeah.
sure. I've got so many games on that list. And by the way, I'm always looking for new independent and um, unique designers to look at their games on stream, talk about them, read through them, play them, and review them. So if you know of anybody, chat, that you'd like to see on Cover to Cover or on anything on my channel, reach out. Let's talk. I'm always happy. If you want to play a game with us, also, feel free to reach out. Um, I'm an English teacher. Linda's a chemistry teacher. We have a couple other teachers in our friend group that play with us. We like to teach people to do things, and that includes play these games.
Sounds
So,
like it's what we do for a living.
yeah, that's what we do. Um,
It's
I,
also like making your own campaign and making your own setting and stuff is such a wonderful writing exercise. Like it takes you past just the traditional fiction writing, and you really have to get into semantics and you really get into the technical writing side that a
mhm.
lot of times is missed in an average writing session.
Oh, definitely. I think one of the most useful things in tabletop games for me has been character creation, as far as like a writing exercise.
Oh my gosh, yes.
The
'Cause you
rest scratches my acting itch.
yeah,
It scratches that itch for theater that I don't always get to accommodate. But making characters in particular has always been that like little bit of playwriting, little bit of short story fiction type of writing thing that I love.
see,
Um,
I get the strategy design out of it. Like as the DM, I love doing the strategy design. Like
yeah.
that's my big thing.
Hmm. It
So
also encourages me to read. That's been a big thing here lately. Since I finished grad school, it's been hard to motivate myself to read. I think I just got burnt out a little bit, and it's starting to get better. But it's been about a year, and I'm starting to feel better. But right after grad school, I didn't want to touch books. Like I had been reading so much and so stressfully that I was like, I need a break. And recently
I,
I picked up because I want to do a video on new sci-fi novels to encourage streams, and I read Binti by Aneti Okunafor. I'll look up her name and share it later because I don't want to say it wrong. Binti is fantastic, and it made me so happy. And I wouldn't have read it had I not wanted some inspiration for tabletop gaming.
I must be the worst person when it like they always ask teachers like, "What are you reading right now? What's your favorite book to read right now?" I'm really not a novel reader.
Do you
Like
get that
I
as a chemistry teacher?
yeah, it's usually
Interesting.
like it's actually really common for just school-wide initiatives to be what is everybody reading because everybody reads, but like I don't read books. I'm more of an article person, and I
Yeah.
read a lot of like sit down, read this like 5 or 10 minute thing. I've actually just recently started reading like fan fiction
Hmm.
on some different like reading apps on my phone where you buy chapters with coins and stuff.
That's really cool.
And yeah, it's been kind of weird to like, oh man, I'm gonna actually sit down and finish this book. And it's like, yeah, I'm cranking out a 200 and something page book in like 2 or 3 days.
Do
And I'm
you
like, this is neat.
Yeah. Do you write at all other than for games?
um Not so most of my writing time is actually spent on doing education stuff because
Mm.
of how much work I do in the chemistry and physics world, particularly on the like training new teacher side. All of my writing goes into how to do stuff in like classrooms, how to help teachers get their classrooms taken care of, best ways to do different things. Like it's all professional writing.
Hold on,
So
bot. Hold on. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Linda. Magic Kids, I'll fix that bot. I see what's happening. I only just activated Nightbot, and I'm still learning how it works. But it is it's blocking Magic Kids in the chat from posting links. Keep talking, Linda. I'll fix that. Linda, you are one of the things we know about you is that you are a teacher. And
yeah.
I know we don't want to get into super specifics like what school you teach at or anything, but tell me a little bit about your teaching experience.
So I've been teaching for, let's see, I started teaching in K-12 in 2013. So before that, I had the really lucky experience of having some super in-depth student teaching while I was in college and at the university level. So my senior year of high school, I actually went to college, and we did early college in Florida. And I was hired on to do a teaching position through the college as like a student teacher. And it was working in this My Math Lab program. We'd gotten this software, and at the time they were like, we're going to start this new thing called hybrid learning. This was in 2009. And so the idea was, well, the kids are gonna learn the content ahead of time at home and then come to class and practice it. It's exactly what COVID learning has turned into, which is really funny to me. But I worked on a project like that for a year, and then I went to university and I worked as like a teaching assistant in our chemistry department and bounced around in the chemistry and math department, did some work there. And then I've taught high school. I did a year when I got out of college. I took a year off for my son. So took a year off, subbed, and then I taught 1 year of middle school. My middle schoolers this year would be juniors this next school year, and I'm kind of really excited about that. Like I want to go back to Florida for their graduation if I can. And then I ended up here in Kentucky after my husband's in the military, so we bounce around. So I ended up in Kentucky in a little school in Western Kentucky, and I've been teaching there now for, this is my 5th year, which seems insane. Like this is the longest I've ever lived in one location since I moved out in high school. So it's been really interesting. I'm like, wow, I actually know places. Like I can go somewhere without Google Maps. This is mind blowing. But Kentucky is not like Florida. It gets cold here.
Yeah. Thanks, Magic Kids, for that. Linda, you might be interested later. Magic Kids put in the chat they have their own teacher resource center, which would be useful to people who are interested
Heck
in
yeah.
this kind of stuff. Right up your alley.
Yeah, yeah. Because I made my Magic the Gathering club. I funded it out of my own pocket.
I remember. I think I gave you a bunch of bulk cards at one point, and I know I helped you sort some.
Yeah, I ended up getting lucky and buying a collection off of somebody. It was like 50,000 cards. I found it on a Facebook just out of a whim, and I knew what the person was trying to get rid of. I knew what it was valued at because I used to buy and sell Magic cards, so I was able to get it for just above market value, like above market flip value. Which, for those of you who don't know, when you buy and sell bulk cards, like they may be worth 5 cents a piece at retail value, but you're not going to get 5 cents a piece when you sell them. You get substantially less. It's usually about $5 per thousand. So I think I paid the guy about $10 per thousand, and I was able to get a shockingly large number of cards for the kids. And so in my classroom, there are 2 of the big card libraries for anybody to come in and just build whatever deck they want. And they're free to the kids as long as they're maintaining good grades, because that's something that unfortunately I think is really common with the nerdy group, is that either they're super addicted to school or they're super not addicted to school. And so this is their compelling reason to keep their grades up. It's like, you won't play Magic or D&D if you don't have passing grades.
When I was substitute teaching regularly, which I don't do anymore, I moved up to the community college life, which is very different, but I love it. I used to substitute teach mostly middle and high school. It was always hilarious to me if students would like see on my bag a D&D pin, or like that I might have a deck box fall out of my bag or something. A couple students eventually realized I was a super nerd and wanted to, like, every time I would come to school, Mr. Williams, I'm building this deck, and they would want to tell me all about it.
Yes.
And at first I was like, how do you, a 15-year-old, have money for that legacy deck? What are you selling? But no, it was great. I got to see meet a lot of cool kids, and give them some cool advice about school and about college coming up, and about games, which always made me super happy. They actually still do that to my wife when she subs. They'll be like, "Please tell me your husband that I'm building modern merfolk or whatever, or that I'm working on this commander deck."
It's because there's a route of super nerds in the education community. Like there are a lot of nerdy teachers out there, but there aren't a lot of nerdy teachers who are openly nerdy about it. Particularly if you're in like the Tennessee, Kentucky area. It's like it's just like, oh, I play Dungeons and Dragons on the weekends. People are like, oh my gosh, you do what?
I straight up am like, all my students know. I talk about my D&D games in class sometimes if my students show up early, because I actually learned that a few. Of course, I haven't lately because the world. I haven't taught a class since last fall. Kind of sucks. I made the mistake of taking the spring off. How are you doing in that regard, Linda? As far as just like, I know things are kind of upside down lately.
It's been we went online. So we went online March 13th, and I had a really funny kind of traumatic experience that I had my gallbladder removed in February. I ended up going into emergency surgery and having to have my gallbladder taken out just out of nowhere. Like literally, I was in Cincinnati that weekend for Valentine's Day. On the drive back, I was in excruciating pain, ended up in the emergency room the next day, like nearly passed out in the front waiting area. And they were like, yeah, your gallbladder's done. I was like, oh. So I was out of school from the middle of February until the first Monday in March. Finally get my feet back underneath me. And the next week we had, Monday was a normal day. Tuesday was statewide ACT day in Kentucky. No. So everybody in the state sits down, takes the ACT. And then Wednesday they call us into a meeting. They're like, hey, so there's this thing called coronavirus. And I'm like, yeah, I've been hearing about it on the news for weeks and months, like since December. Like, I'm so glad that you caught on. And they were like, it's coming. I was like, it's not winter, guys. Like, we knew about this. It's not just going to show up and wipe everything out. And my kids were like, oh, we'll be back in a week. I was like, no. We're going to shut down. Like, this is going to completely halt everything. And sure enough, it did.
Overall, how are the students doing that you've heard?
It's been 50-50. I'm really lucky that I have what I would think are pretty strong relationships with a lot of my students. So I do run the D&D club at my school. I have my own D&D campaign that I run. Several of my students run their own campaigns. So the club has about 50-ish kids, but there are between 8 and 10 that sit on my
50 kids.
Yeah, for a school of 650-ish, give or take, 50 kids is massive.
This is why I invited you on. Like, I know other people that do things like this, that work with that are teachers and do clubs like this. But the fact that you have what is a large percentage of your student body in your group is just an interesting phenomenon.
We're one of the largest clubs on the campus that is not job related. Like, we have Future Farmers of America, we have HOSA, we have FCCLA, which is the child care. HOSA is for health. We have FBLA, Future Business Leaders. Those clubs are all mandatory for students that are in those career paths. So I don't really count those when I'm thinking of like, what's the biggest club on campus? But for the biggest, like for the non-career related ones, the only one that beats us out is Pep Club. So the school's like Pride Happy Club, and then Magic and D&D.
There you go.
So I'm like, go nerds. We're doing great.
Do you have any students that are like prospective, like aspiring game designers?
I've got some that I'm like trying to push into it, but none that have like come out and said it.
Okay.
Most of them are like, I'm going to go into teaching. I'm like, wonderful. Guess what you're going to do? My job. So
when my students are like, I want to be a teacher, I'm like, think hard about that.
Honestly, like as much as education drives me up a wall, some days, I wouldn't change it for anything. Like, I love being a teacher.
Oh, I love it too, but I'm not like saying everybody needs to do that to themselves.
Oh yeah, no, this is not for the faint of heart.
I
Please do not.
realize what I'm doing to myself.
Yeah,
Don't try
like,
this at home, kids.
it's this is a passion job. If you do not live, breathe, sleep, eat teaching, you're gonna get burnt out real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's not one of those like Freedom Riders or whatever other inspirational education movie you've watched. Like, if you're expecting to come in and climb up onto a desk and all the kids are gonna start crying because you're such a wonderful person, I got news for you. It's not gonna happen. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into this, and it's if you reach out and make strong connections with 5 out of your 100 kids, you're doing good.
Mm-hmm.
And if you only have 100 kids, you're blessed.
Yeah, and let's not forget that, like, when you start adding on things like being a advisor for a student organization or club, that's even more. I know.
Oh, yeah.
I've never done anything like that, but I've definitely like helped with booster clubs and stuff, and even that like is exhausting. So I definitely commend those teachers out there who are going the extra mile. I know I did theater in high school and in college, and in high school my theater teacher was one of my like more important mentors to me, and Lord knows that man was on campus like 12 hours a day.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I did really good this year. I told myself I was not going to take work home, and then Corona hit, and it was just like, I see you've made this goal. That's adorable. I ended up, I think I get onto campus about 6:45 in the morning. I have a student that races me to class every day, which is really funny. So I'll come onto the building, and I'll like, my room is down a hallway, but when I turn down the hallway, you don't see my door because of how the hallway's set up. It's really weird. So I like will skate along the edge of the wall so I can see if he's sitting in front of my door.
I wish I had students that were there early enough to race me to class. When you get to college students, they don't have that much gusto.
No, they don't.
I actually had a student call me, and let me clarify. I had a student from 2 years ago call me yesterday, or 2 days ago. It's been 2 days. He called me, hey, Mr. Williams, I just wanted to call you because I couldn't remember if you said if I could use CNN and Fox in a paper, and I'm embarrassed to ask my current teacher. And
that's
like,
you made that kind of connection with the kid.
Yeah, I was like, well, I'm glad you were willing to call and ask me, dude. Don't use Fox or CNN in your paper.
Yeah, don't do that. That's bad.
But it was just kind of weird. He was like, and I remembered him more or less. But yeah, it was just kind of weird. It was like, hey, you put your number on your syllabus 2 years ago, so I thought I have a question.
I actually have a Google Voice number that I've used since I got to my new school.
That's a good idea.
It's always been on my syllabus, but it didn't become relevant until this year. Like, my AP Physics kids had it, and they would call and text me. But it didn't really become relevant until this year, and I started using it to text students just to check on them.
Mm-hmm.
And like that one kid that's always quiet in class, yeah, I'm gonna send him a meme to make sure that they're okay. Or like, I may call the one girl who's super happy and always has a million friends because she's not seeing anybody right now. What's that doing for her psyche? And just reach out to those kids. It's been really wonderful. It's also great for making parent contact. The downside is I don't have a Kentucky number, so I still get parents that are like, nope, this is spam, and I'm like, that's wonderful. Please save my phone number.
That's great.
But it's still there.
I might have to take you up or take a cue from you on that Google Voice number. That's a great idea. I just put my cell phone number, and I should not do that.
Yeah. My thought was with a cell phone number, if something were to happen and I were to lose said phone number for whatever reason, the Google Voice number is just tied to my email. So if I change the number, it'll still come to me. And you get logs of all of your text messages, which is really great in education because if somebody wants to hit you about impropriety, they can't.
Mm-hmm.
So, because that's something like my D&D club, we have a Discord. If any of my little D&D players are in there, hi. But we have a Discord server, and so we've actually been able to keep our D&D game going for the most part
I
over
was going to ask
Discord.
about that. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was something like I was really big. I think last summer we started a Discord. It was either last summer or summer before last. We started a Discord, and we tried to keep the games going during the summer
Mm-hmm.
because I got really attached to my campaigns. I homebrewed all my world. Like we're on the second campaign now, and it's still in my homebrew world, and we're just expanding on it. So
You have
I've grown
yeah,
that.
you actually have a fascinating campaign from what I remember. Can you tell me or tell the chat a little bit about kind of what you got going on in your school game?
So right now, my kids are in the Feywilds, and our campaign. The nice thing about writing your own campaign is you can write pretty much whatever you want into it, and particularly when you're teaching kids, it's really important to be able to write in particular story hooks. And so the last campaign was about a a Fey queen trying to come up and take over a throne, which she succeeded in doing, but she had a nasty divorce that created a large war in the Feywilds, and it was kind of the kids had to choose a side and figure out like which is the less of two evils. And it we had a lot of stuff with like the ghost realm and what is like there's never going to be a perfectly right answer and a perfectly wrong answer, so you've just got to kind of pick. They dealt with an emerald dragon that was kidnapping dragonborns and selling them into slavery, and there was a race of oh my gosh, halflings, I think. Yeah, there was a race of halflings that had been like genocided almost into extinction, and they dealt with like people gaining rights and racism and sexism and classism and all the other isms that I think are really relevant to modern life as we just keep seeing all this stuff pop up on the news.
That's really interesting. Sorry, I don't mean to stop you, but I want to talk about that. That's really interesting because there's been a discussion amongst the tabletop gaming community on Twitter, especially primarily, but Reddit and stuff as well, about that maybe it's time to stop focusing on those types of really sensitive issues in games. I think they're mostly talking about like for streams because you have an audience and such. And that often they have this like I also think a lot of that is like focused on like having like that as a background feature. But when you're talking about kids who are learning what to believe and what their like outlook on the world is, to me that kind of adds an extra layer to that discussion because when you address those things, they're at an age where they're learning about that history and such that maybe we don't have the benefit of.
Yeah, and especially like I teach in a small town. I teach in a small town where everybody looks, and unfortunately, some people still have those beliefs. I mean, we're in the Bible Belt. We're in the South, and I've seen those beliefs in person, and it's heart-wrenching. The kids need to know how to deal with that kind of stuff and how to confront it. And it doesn't need to be like, I'm not calling them out and it's like, okay, today we're going to like, I'm not saying today we're going to learn about racism, guys. It's just a subtle undertone that's there.
Yeah.
Like at one point in the last campaign, the kids came across a baker, and the baker had purchased employees to help her. And it was this little girl, two little girls, I think we named them Azula and Rose. And it was a little blue dragonborn girl and a little red dragonborn girl. And they were purchased to be like temp agents. The owner had purchased them to just do work. And she was like, okay, I went to the temp agency. I bought some helpers. I paid the temp agency. I have these workers now. The baker, little dense, didn't understand that she bought a living person. And so the party comes into it, figures this out, and they're like, you do recognize that they're slaves, right? Like these little girls are calling you ma'am and they're not making eye contact with you because you purchased them and they've been trained to behave in a particular way. And the lady was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. because there was no slavery on the island that she was at. This was a
Mhm.
relatively new concept of people bringing in this.
That's
And so
interesting.
the kids kind of dealt with, do we release these two very young children from their slave
Mhm.
contracts, because the dragonborn children were like ages 2 and 3 at the time. So
Mhm.
dragonborn ages can be really weird, but they were essentially young children. And it's like, well, what happens if you just release two young children from their contracts? Like, these kids are homeless, they have no parents.
Mhm.
Where do they go? What happens? Who's going to take care of them? They're not old enough to fend for themselves. Is it now the owner's responsibility to take care of two things that she thought were temp workers? She didn't recognize that she purchased them for long-term commitment. She thought
Mhm.
she was supposed to return them after a period of time.
Mhm.
Does she return them back to their original slave owner? Like, it brought up all these implications, and it was a really interesting thing for the kids to work through.
Yeah,
And
and
are they going to encounter that on their daily basis? No, probably not. Like, this is modern America. Are there slaves in the United States? Absolutely. Is it something that the average person is going to run across? No.
Mhm.
But it's something that we can work through, and they
Mhm.
can figure out, like, how do I stand up for myself in this situation? How do I play
Yeah.
needs of somebody else? Where do I put them on a hierarchy? How do we think about outcomes that may not be perfect?
Mhm.
There is no right answer to that situation.
I think this just brings up a good point that perhaps when we're looking at the schema of tabletop gaming in an educational environment, and I know the club itself is not necessarily like an educational mission, right? That
Oh,
it's still for fun, like after school
oh
fun.
yeah.
But that's always in the back of you are a teacher and they are students. And it adds that extra layer that maybe adds some complexity to certain discussions.
Oh yeah.
Um,
And I mean, there, like, I do go into these things planning for particular learning and experiences.
yeah.
Like, I know my kids, I know my players.
Hmm.
And one of the things is, I know the players who need help learning how to talk to people.
Hmm.
I know which ones of my players have a hard time coming out of their shell and approaching somebody at the front of the class to ask a question.
Hmm.
So I'm going to put them in situations where they're dealing with the rugged authority figure, or the dismissive person who just doesn't want to hear what they have to say, and or that shopkeep. Like, introducing yourself to a shopkeeper, and how do you change the way you talk based on who you're interacting with?
Hmm.
I can make those environments for the kids. I can be the angry shopkeeper. I can be the happy shopkeeper. I can be the little bit cautious shopkeeper. And they can interact with all those different experiences and see all those different body languages and inflections and how the interaction
Yeah.
goes. And they test out different things intentionally.
Yeah,
So,
it's a safe place to experiment with social interaction.
exactly. And it's a safe place to just be you.
Yeah.
For some of my kids, they're used to being this different person. It's funny, and one of the things I'm sure you know is that if a teenager writes something, it's almost autobiographical, because most
Hmm.
kids put so much of themselves into their fictional writing. So when my students write characters, they're oftentimes creating the best version of
Oh
themselves
yeah.
to forth.
Do
And
you
so,
ever do you ever run into issues with another big topic that's come up a lot and something that I've tried to talk about some is safety tools in gaming? And I've started instituting, in especially games on stream, things like lines and veils, where you get your players to help you set up the boundaries for your game, like content that's not really welcome because of past experiences or what it brings up for a person, or the X card, which is just a way to queue up to let the game master know that this situation is something that makes me deeply uncomfortable. Can we move on?
I
And
have not really thought about that. But okay, I have and I haven't.
mhm.
I have not intentionally placed it in any of my games. I would be more than willing to put it into my
Mhm.
games, but I've also talked to almost all of my
Yeah,
players
the
for
better you
long.
know your players, the less necessary it is. Though
Yeah,
I've
I definitely think I'm to the point where I wouldn't need that with all my players. There are
mhm.
some new players that I should probably, like, I've never really thought about, like, sitting down and having that conversation with some of them.
Yeah.
But definitely some of my newer players, I could see that as useful.
Mhm.
But most
I've
of my
worked it into my session zeros now that I ask everyone. I'm like, if there's anything that like it's going to make this not fun, if this becomes a featured thing in the game, write it down and let me know. If you don't
yeah,
feel like saying it out loud, if you're or for my wife, for instance, and she's okay with me saying this, animal cruelty, like in gratuitous amounts, is something she cannot stomach in a game.
yeah.
And I learned this because I had a situation in which there was like a dog or something that was very mistreated in a game when we first started, and she was like, that was not fun.
I I try to stray away from some of the like really big triggers. Like I'm obviously not going
Mhm.
to talk about sexual assault with a bunch
Yeah,
of high schoolers. We're not going to like grotesquely murder somebody. Like I try
sure.
to keep my game to a PG-13 rating ish.
Yeah.
But will there be strong language occasionally? But
Mhm.
the kids aren't cussing anybody out, and I'm not cussing them out.
Yeah,
A flip here and there, and we do talk about violence. There have been many a beheaded goblin
sure.
and other bad guys. Like when we're in combat, they get to do their finishing move. I let them within reason. Like, how do you want to finish this? How do you
On
want
a
to do
scale
this?
of 1 to Doom.
Yeah, like tell me how this plays out in your head.
Yeah.
And we get some wonderful flavor there, but I've never. It's definitely something I probably should do, and it makes good sense. Like
Yeah.
it's never been something I've really thought about.
Interesting. I'll share you some things,
Yeah,
some resources later. I think you'll be interested in.
yeah, I'll
Um,
definitely add. Like I do go around talking about Dungeons and Dragons in high school, so I'll add them to my presentation. We'll get that out there for teachers because
sure. And I think
something.
that's yeah, I think that's a good segue to go into. You have done a lot of traveling and presenting on the benefits of things like Dungeons and Dragons. I know yours is more pretty specifically about Dungeons and Dragons. I'm just using tabletop gaming because it kind of goes with what
I try
this
to
channel.
go specific to D&D.
Mhm.
Like I've done other RPGs. I do Dungeons and Dragons in my classroom just because we have something. It's a 21st Century Learning Centers grant. It's through the federal government,
Mhm.
and it is a grant for after-school programs. Typically, these grants are picked up by like the Boys and Girls Club or YMCA or other large youth centers. But schools can get these grants to run after-school programs. And when
Okay.
you think of programming, most people are like little kids, elementary, and that's what the majority of these conferences I've been to are geared towards.
Okay.
But it's actually like we have an after school program for high schoolers. It is, we provide all kinds of activities. There's leadership, there's career oriented. Obviously, we do homework help. And so my big thing is doing Dungeons and Dragons for social emotional learning. And so I've
Mhm.
presented on that. And I just talk about D&D because we got funding from that program to purchase books. And
Okay.
so I knew 5th edition. I felt comfortable running
Mhm.
5th edition games. So I was like, let's buy 5th edition books. They're pretty cheap on Amazon,
Mhm.
and we can get like most of the kids new 5th edition. I do have some students that run other campaigns. Like
Mhm.
I think we had a Star Wars campaign going. We had a Fallout campaign at one point. We've had Pathfinder, older versions of Dungeons and Dragons. Some kids just homebrew it.
Mhm.
There was a game that was running in my room for a while that was a bunch of freshman boys, and it was straight homebrew, just whatever they had come up with, and it was more of a like fluid conversation.
Oh,
And it was interesting to listen in on, but I was like, there are no rules that I can hear. Like I'm sure there were, but I was just like, that is no rule set I have literally ever heard before.
that's kind of great though. I love that. But do you think that like
Like,
helping you get those grants was the name recognition of D&D as kind of the
no,
larger product in that realm? Did that you think play a part in helping you get the grant?
no,
No.
absolutely not.
Okay.
Not at all. Like, if anything, people are probably like, "You
Okay.
nerd."
Part
Like,
part of my reason for asking that is I'm big on advocating for purchasing small games from indie designers and other people that are not Wizards of the Coast.
Oh my gosh.
I like wizards. I understand they have problems, especially here recently, and I don't.
Mhm.
I try not to talk about wizards because they get enough without me talking about them on my little stream.
Hasbro Corporation, of course they get enough. They're
Yeah,
owned by one of the largest toy conglomerates.
they don't need my help, and I honestly don't want to endorse wizards until they work on a few things, and I think they're
Yeah,
headed in the right direction. I am glad that they're getting rid of that they're working towards getting rid of racial modifiers. I would actually like to see the word race replaced with species as well. One, it's more accurate, and two, that word doesn't have as much baggage.
yeah.
Um,
I
but
think a
that's
lot of the semantics, like we'll all still
yeah.
play it. And I agree, like
It
we're
is semantics, but like anything that helps more people have fun and makes this a more
absolutely,
welcome game, I am for. Um,
absolutely.
and there's been so many great alternatives to racial modifiers recommended as of late. In Roll20 Presents Lost Mans of Fandelver, they are using a class-based ability modifier system that makes me think of like a game like Mass Effect, right? Where like at the beginning of the game, like it asks like, as a rogue, do you prefer to talk your way out of a tense situation or slip away at the first distraction?
Or
And
go
depending
fight.
on what you pick, you might get a +1 in dexterity or charisma.
Yeah.
And that's how it decides those things instead. And I think that's way better. It still
Oh
keeps
yeah.
like dark vision and stuff, but it gets rid of those like Goliaths are naturally stronger than humans because of
Yeah.
there's historical and cultural baggage with those things.
And I wouldn't mind that being a species thing. Like if you just say that their special traits are not
Yeah,
biology in any way, shape, or form. But there
yeah,
are some like fish can swim and like can breathe underwater.
sure, and those are
Like
abilities, so that's a
yeah,
little different.
yeah,
Um,
those abilities, like I would lump dark vision into that.
yeah,
And some of the strength stuff maybe
yeah.
because like
I feel like
I could
intelligence is where it gets a little more like
yeah,
when you start saying that a person is naturally smarter than another person because of their genetics, you start getting into some really troublesome thought patterns.
yeah, and I can
Um,
get that because like especially like goblins, if you have a player character that's a
mhm,
goblins are seen as or orcs are seen as
mhm.
these just like dumb grunts.
Yeah, and we
And
talked about this on two cover to covers ago, uh, and just about like how Tolkien and other early fantasy writers were based in this in like the philosophy of racial essentialism, and we're
yeah,
slowly working away from that, and I love that. And all of this is to say that Wizards, I do play Dungeons and Dragons, though I am starting to play more other games. Um, they're not my focus on this channel, but
yeah,
I think what we have to talk about today applies to gaming as a whole.
yeah. And
So
just it's not just the fantasy world that is
yeah,
played with.
all of this was a long-winded preface.
Yeah. I
uh,
mean, I played Vampires of the Masquerade. They've got that there too. I've played
yeah,
Shadow. It's got it. Like this is not a Dungeons and Dragons specific problem. This is
yeah,
anything that's been created in the last 100 years has got this
hmm
issue of dealing with equality and how are we going to bring that into our player base. But I
hmm
think a lot of player bases have also done really well to make
yeah.
that modification themselves.
hmm
Like,
I'm starting to question a little bit just because of the way they've been talking about it online. Some of the Wizard staff has really been hitting hard on that, like, yeah, these are our rules, but you can make them whatever you want. And that's
and I,
fair. Like, if you don't like it, change it. I get that, and
yeah,
I'm going to change it. But that doesn't mean I don't want to see the source material refined.
exactly. Like, I think there's a lot of things like, for example, Wizard doesn't come out and say that you can be a gender fluid character, but I mean, I'm building a character right now for a campaign that's a gender fluid Eladrin
hmm
who bounces between male and female based on whatever pick she wants because she's a rogue assassin. Like
hmm
if she if she needs to take out a high profile male, then she's going to present it as a female, and if she wants to take out a high profile female, then he's going to don a really nice suit and be the most attractive man you've ever met.
hmm
And that's just it's based on how they feel that day in that moment.
My
And
my most beloved character, Calico Jack, was a bard in an early game I played, and Jack was kind of like that because he was a changeling. He didn't
Yeah.
really like equate personhood or identity to physical appearance in any way, shape, or form. And that was a really interesting character to try to understand for me.
I think that's one of the best parts about playing a character that's not like that's new to you. Like, I'm not a gender fluid person. I do not identify as gender fluid. I'm a cisgendered female.
Yeah.
And for me, building M has been an interesting experience because I'm having to play around with somebody who isn't necessarily feminine and isn't necessarily masculine. It's based on the events of the day and how things are playing out, and that really impacts their opinion of themselves and just so many of their character aspects. Because when you build a character, like I built a character for a recent game, Roars, who's a little bard. I've never played a bard before in my life, and Roars is 6 years old and a very happy little bard boy and just loving life and everything that he can be. And I'm like, I get to play as a little kid, and it's like looking at the world through the eyes of a preschooler. It's just like everything is fascinating and fun, and every emotion is heightened because you're seeing something for the first time or you're doing something for the first time, and it's such a fun experience. But I'm not 6 years old. I'm not a little boy, but I get to experience the world in that sense. And so it's something where it's making me think, like, how would a little kid look at this? How would they look at this? And I think for people who are trying to see the other side, like playing a character like that really helps you. Because for me, D&D is method acting. Every roleplay game I've been in is method acting. It's immersing yourself into that role and being that character, like just enjoying seeing the world through the lenses of somebody else.
Very nice. And I think that brings us into you have a presentation. Oh, well, real quick, tell me about kind of your experience going around and talking about this type of stuff.
So most of my talks about this have been in Kentucky and in Indiana, Illinois, like this area. Like I haven't really traveled much outside of this little tiny area, and it's been interesting. Most people I come across are incredibly happy about it, and the people who come to the presentations tend to be people who already like Dungeons and Dragons and are already very into role play games and are like, this is something I wanted to do at my school, and I've never really thought about it, or I didn't think that I could do it. And it's like if you want to put a role play game at your school, you really don't need a ton of kids. And this is something that you can run a campaign with 2 students, 3 students. I wouldn't necessarily want to do a one-on-one campaign. Like that sounds a little like intimidating, particularly because I'm used to running such big campaigns. I have got 10 to 12 players at a time, but you don't need a ton of people for this. And really all you need is a player handbook, a dungeon master guide, and a monster manual of whatever brand you've got. So most of them are going to have those 3 books of some way, and then you're good to go. Like you can write down everything on a sheet of paper. There's dice rollers on your phone. Like there are enough free campaigns out there that other RPGs from smaller developers, you can get literally everything for free and just run it. You don't need anything. You don't even need to print it. So a lot of people that come to these are already super into it. It's the people that I talk to in the hallways. That's the interesting ones because they're the people who are not so into it. I've been a nerd for my entire life. So dealing with people who are anti-nerd is not something that's new to me. And it can be off-putting for younger people who are starting this. If you are a new teacher and like you wanted to start a Dungeons and Dragons club at your school, I would hesitate to tell you to do it. Like, and I feel terrible for saying those words out loud, but it would depend on your location. Like I've had parents tell me like, how could you? You're a devil worshiper. You're brainwashing these children. I'm not. This is not devil worship.
People often talk about the satanic panic in gaming as if when they'll say that in the 70s and 80s. If you're from the American South, it's more like the 90s and early 2000s that
Yeah,
ended,
exactly.
and not
This
really even then. It's still going on a little bit.
it's still live and kicking. Like when my husband and I first met, we play Magic the Gathering. One of the reasons we hit it off so well is that we're both really into Magic, and we play a lot of Commander. We were playing at a Wendy's, and this lady came up to us and just starts losing her mind. She's like, "How could you do your devil worship in public?" And like starts tearing into us.
You got
Or
Karened before Karening was cool.
I know, right? This was like 2013. Like, this lady was losing her mind, goes up to the manager, like, you should banish these people from the restaurant. They're going to get us all sucked into a vortex to hell.
You should have told her that Banish is a 5th level spell, and she's obviously not high enough level for that.
I was just like, I was so shocked because I was like, I hadn't really seen it a whole lot before. Like I'd had people that were like, "Oh, I don't play those games," or "I don't hang out with those kinds of people." I'm like, "Oh, so you're not a nerd? That's fine, whatever. Like you go do you, bro." But to have somebody come up to me and do that at such a young age, I was just like, "This is oddly unsettling." And now that I've been doing it for several years, like I actually had a parent last school year do that, and I was just like, I was kind of shocked for a moment, but I also felt really sad because here it was, their kid wanted to join this group and couldn't.
Oh yeah.
And it's heartbreaking because you know that kid wants to do it, but the parents are like, "No, this is terrible." And I'm like, I can't go against what your parents want. Like if your parents say you can't join this club, like unfortunately you can't join. Like that's a conversation.
Anytime in my teaching experience that I've run into kids with problematic or kind of espousing shitty beliefs. I'm not going to say their beliefs are shitty per se, but they are espousing shitty beliefs. When it's a kid, I don't get that like feeling. It's more of like I really hate to see that feeling because where is it coming from?
I feel bad because that's learned behavior. It's like when a little kid, like whenever you hear of, all the isms that come out of like a 7-year-old's mouth, I can promise you that 7-year-old has no idea what they're talking about. They learned that from someone. Mm-hmm. That is a learned behavior. They are mimicking. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about role play games is that we can show them how that looks in a way before they get out into the real world. They actually say something like that and they lose a job. Because if one of my kids comes up and is like, "Oh, well, you're an orc and I just don't work with orcs because orcs are lesser beings," and that orc pulls out a battle axe and just goes to town, like they can see that it's like, oh, racism has problems. Yeah, just a little bit.
What are you doing?
Like, don't do that. That's bad. Please learn about these things before you get out. And it's something that I've had players that when they build their characters, they're like, my character is really hesitant to be around humans. And I'm like, perfect. I'm going to force your character to be around humans. Or like, my character thinks that women aren't as good at their jobs as men. I'm like, wonderful. You're gonna compete against a very competitive woman, just so that they can work through that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the best way for them to experience that. Mm-hmm. without being in, I hate to call it the real world, but life after high school or life after college.
I think that's
because
fair.
When you go to your first job, if your boss is a woman and you think that women are lesser, you're in for a shock when she fires you.
Oh man. All right. Well, I think it's about time to get to the actual. I've now pulled up the audience can see the dragon in the room.
Hey.
So I'm actually going to like straight shut up for a little while and let you do your Linda thing.
Sure. Well, we've kind of hit on a whole bunch of this stuff, but if you're interested in this presentation or any of the links that are embedded in it, that bit.ly right there, I'm sure Casey can put it somewhere, will take you directly to this presentation. I'm also going to be filming this for my own YouTube channel that I'm putting together. So check that out in the next couple of weeks. I'll send the info to Casey whenever I get that up and going.
Yeah, I'll make sure
And
it's
then
on my Twitter and stuff as well.
it'll be on my Facebook. I'm hesitant to get onto Twitter. I don't feel that I've ascended to that level of adulthood yet, but apparently that's what all the cool kids are doing. So we'll get a Twitter one of these days, maybe, probably not. But let's see if there it goes. So it's really important for people to know that a role play game is just a game. Like when we do role play, it's a game in which players assume the roles of fictional characters in fictional settings. Like nobody's actually going to die when you do any role play game. If you're doing a role play game where somebody could legitimately die, that's a problem. That's not role play. That's a dangerous situation. Like even in LARPing, which is live action role play, if you're LARPing, you have blunted weapons and they're made out of soft, plushy foam, and you're not gonna you have such a minimal chance of having actual bodily injury. I'm not gonna say there's no chance, because in live action role play, like you could, I don't know, fall over a rock or something, like you could get hurt, but it's incredibly minimal. Like nobody's going to pull out a great sword and just start going to town. But it's also a structured environment in which we're learning to do decision making. We're learning how to work with our emotions. We're learning how to work with other people in other cultures and environments. Essentially, role play games are our time to learn and practice social emotional learning, which social emotional learning, for anybody who's not a teacher, you've probably never heard this term before. Social emotional learning is learning about how to work in social environments and how to work with your emotions. And it's a very deliberate thing. A lot of times it gets left out, but people need to be taught how to interact with somebody who's sad. How do we change our body language and our tone around somebody who's angry? What does it mean for somebody to be offended? And how can our actions impact the other people around us? Social emotional learning is the reason a lot of people go to school without realizing it. One of the biggest things you learn in school is how to deal with other people. And so that's also something that we can refine through role play games, because in a role play game setting, we're really going to be tackling a lot of those situations that aren't just, this is your coworker. Your coworker didn't give you the report on time. Now you're late in making your report. No, it's, you've got to go get 10 rats for the local, the local barber. Why? Who knows? Let's figure out, let's learn, let's ask those questions. And I like to think about it as like interactive video games or interactive storytelling. It's such an opportunity to learn about yourself through other environments. And role play games have actually been around for an insanely long time. And so the original role play games were actually war strategy games from back in like ancient China. And they were used as thought exercises for generals. So this was something that chess was born from, and all these other strategy games were born from, like Go. And then the concept of having the person-to-person interactions stuck around. And these games were actually going long before Tolkien did Lord of the Rings. Like there were role-play games. There was one in the early 1900s called Assassin, where people would go out into large crowds and play these games where they would pretend to assassinate people. And I mean, these, like, Charlie Chaplin played these games. These were not unheard of small games. Like, these were insanely popular.
Do you mind if I throw in something real quick, Linda? Yeah. You may be about to say this, and if so, I'm sorry, but something I've always been interested in, what we know, kind of in our modern understanding, can also be traced back to the author of War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells, who was a big fan of the military starting to use dioramas and small-scale models to replicate historic battles.
Yeah, and it was incredibly popular. Like, this wasn't something that was just like a bunch of nerds did it at home. Like, this was used for learning experiences and doing live action role play. Like the US Army had an entire division dedicated to creating false appearances. Like this was not an unheard of thing. But the fantasy element came in with Tolkien. The what we now when we think role play games, we think Dungeons and Dragons. We think the big dragon and you're going in and you're going to go slay the dragon. That came in because of Tolkien. And so many people clung to Tolkien's fantasy realm. It made sense to take what was already popular in the culture, role play games, and add in a new thing that was hitting popular culture, our fantasy. And so we melded that in, and it took a long time for this to fully meld. I think it was the 70s was when Dungeons and Dragons first like came to fruition, and there were some play tests before that, but this was an ongoing process, and I'm sure people had come up with fantasy worlds before Tolkien, but the idea of elves and fairies and dragons and orcs and stuff became fairly popular. And even to this day, as things come up in popular culture, there's a role play game that goes with it. Like we talked about earlier, Pokemon. My classroom is themed in Pokemon. That's how my kids know that I'm a nerd. Like you open the door and bam, it's right there in your face. 150 Pokemon dangling from the ceiling. It is a sight to behold. It does one of two things. Parents either go, oh, heck no, I'm not walking into that room, and back out slowly. Or their kids come rushing in and they're like, I have found my home for the next 4 years. And so it definitely draws in all the nerds. Like they know where to find me. I'm the nerd mom. But there's a Pokemon roleplay game. There's a Harry Potter roleplay game. Harry Potter became insanely popular, so they made a Harry Potter roleplay game. Like there's a roleplay game for Twilight. There's a roleplay game for literally anything fantasy related. There are also roleplay games that are very modern. Like when I did Vampire of the Masquerades, it has a more modern shift. Like there's technology in it. A lot of the games take place in like current times.
Monster
And
Hearts.
huh?
Monster Hearts literally is about being in a 2000s and forward high school as a student who is secretly a monster. That's the game. The first game that came to mind when you said that. You're literally like for a high schooler would literally be playing someone in their situation.
Yeah. And that would be a fun one to do. Like, I don't know that I would want to do it with high schoolers because I feel like that would just bore them to death. They're like, I'm already high schoolers. The part of a role play game is to be somebody else for a little bit.
But as a werewolf.
Oh, yeah. Like, that could be interesting. Like, let's introduce that idea. Maybe not at my school, but if you're in a more liberal area, have at it. But I mean, yeah, Dungeons and Dragons is obviously the most well-known. It is literally the most popular roleplay game of all time. It's been around for years and years and years. Before both of us were born, combine our age and keep going. I've played Shadowrun. It's a modern cyberpunk, and a lot of these games you'll notice are definitely targeted towards teenagers. Why are we targeting them towards teenagers? Very simply, there are combat in these. There's going to be combat, and like we talked about earlier in the stream, there's going to be all the isms. Do you really want to be trying to talk about racism at a deep level with a 5-year-old? Like, I have a 5-year-old. We have discussed racism, we've discussed sexism, but not at the depth that I would with a teenager. Like, it's just not something I would bring up at his age range. I would wait until he's a little bit older. And that's a lot of these games target at the older audiences. It also has to do with some of the math, the logic, and the reading skills that are involved. If you think that Dungeons and Dragons is just this like non-academic pursuit, I introduce you to read the player handbook. It is several hundred pages of very technical jargon. And it is literally a brilliant exercise in technical reading and writing skills, because you have to learn to use a manual and go to the different pages in the manual and properly use an index and properly use a table of contents to find information in a reference book.
I never thought about the technical writing experience that it gives you. That's interesting.
Yeah, like when people are talking about, when you get to your job, you're not going to be reading an anthology of short stories. You're going to be working with a manual. I'm like, yeah, we do that in Dungeons and Dragons.
When I left my job at a museum here locally, I had to make a manual for my replacement on how to use all the sound system stuff. I just realized that I made tables, and where did I get that idea from?
Exactly, from Dungeons and Dragons and roleplay games and everything else that we've done. Like, I mean, I have got books of tables. I buy a lot of the aftermarket, third party, not official D&D books because I have a small strange addiction to different source books. And I've got books that are literally nothing but tables of random things so that my kids like, well, what kind of flower is it? I bet you weren't expecting me to have an answer to that one. Now, were you, buddy? Let me just roll this number really quick. It's Wolfsbane. Like, and then there's Star Wars. Like I said, if it was popular, there's a role-playing game that goes with it. Pathfinder is a really popular one. It is in second place to D&D. I do like Pathfinder in that I feel like it's easier to get into. The books are cheaper. They're available in paperback, which is like fantastic for your wallet. And a lot of like, if you go to shops and you buy the pre-con minis and things like that, a lot of them are Pathfinder. And this is one you and I have been talking about, Hero Kids. It is actually geared for little kids. There's less math, there's less reading, there's less writing. It's more pictograms, but it is insanely well reviewed. It's
I'm gonna pull up the cover for it for people to see real quick.
I want to play it. Like,
we will be playing it. I guarantee we will get to it.
Yes, it is on my to-do list. And you can scale any of these games up or down. Like, the math that's involved in this stuff isn't differential calculus, but it's certainly not basic arithmetic. It depends on the character that you're playing. It's a lot of probability. It's a lot of percentages. It's a lot of doing mental math. And I was talking to somebody at one of those conferences, and they were like, how can you make this an academic pursuit? I'm like, it already is. The kids have multipliers, and they have to think about the percentage and the chance of them doing something, and they roll a dice, and then they add this number to it. They may multiply it by something. They may have to roll 2 dice and take the higher number or take the lower number. Like, all those basic algebra skills that we really wish kids had as they get into more advanced mathematics, they get that in Dungeons and Dragons. And they get that speed element because no DM wants to sit there and wait for you to count it out on your fingers. That makes combat take too long.
And I have it pulled up. Anyone interested? This is the Heroes Kids book. We're gonna read through a little bit of this if we have time. I hope we do.
Yeah. I've also got it linked right there. If you are interested in purchasing the Hero Kids, that takes you to their site. These all take you to the original, to the owner site. So, like, if you're interested in purchasing any of these, you can click on those links and it'll take you to them.
I got this one in a COVID-19 bundle. Fun fact, there's a lot of great bundles right now. If anyone's looking to up their library, there's a great... it may have ended yesterday. There was a great collection of Black Lives Matter related charity funds where you could get like 50 plus RPGs for $10.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Especially because that's one of the downsides, I think, to roleplay games is that the big names, there is a gatekeeper, and the gatekeeper is called money. The nice thing about running the club through this grant is that the grant purchased the books. We used this grant to purchase the source books for the kids. So I've got 2 copies of every one of the main books. And then I personally purchased one of every one of the main books as well, so that I would have a copy in the classroom. And then we also bought some of the campaign books. We got dice for all the kids, which I end up purchasing. Every year I buy the kids dice. When we start a new campaign, everybody gets new dice. I put them into opaque bags, and they randomly select their dice for the campaign because the dice choose the player.
I love that.
I'm telling you, it is the truth. It is the gosh honest truth. I buy bulk sets of dice off of Amazon, and I painstakingly split these like pounds of dice into their sets of 7 and put them into dice bags, and then just like have this box of dice bags. When I get a new player, I'm like reach in and grab one, and one of them pulled out. He's like, watch, this new character is gonna get like hot pink dice. Reaches in, these are all black felt bags. Bam, pulls out the hot pink dice to go with them. I'm like, yep, you
That's
called it.
awesome. I want. That's interesting that you mentioned the one of the biggest gatekeepers is money. I am a big advocate of paying creators if you are able. I think that if we want to keep this community thriving, then it means that we have to invest in it. And that means investing in our creators, the people that are out here making the things for us to enjoy. I recently purchased a copy of Swords Falls Summon of Kings, which I'm so excited to run. It's a game that, like, I could have waited or something, but it's so good. And Brandon Dixon's making some really innovative games, and I wanted to help him keep making new games. Kickstarter is a great way to do that. I get if you can't, though. Like, any one of you out there who, like, finds that it's just a little too expensive, I certainly understand. And if you're in that position, I mentioned this bundle that I recently purchased. I purchased a bunch of COVID-19 bundles, and I purchased a Black Lives Matter bundle, and I purchased a Minnesota Bail Fund bundle. Altogether, those did not cost me a lot. So if you wait, a lot of companies and a lot of publishers will do discount days. And if not, find someone to play with who may have a little more access than you, and maybe they can help you out and let you borrow some books, or find a club where maybe your teacher has some more access than you do.
Or start a club.
I understand that that's an obstacle, but there are ways around it. If you need help getting around that, reach out to me. And tonight's your chance. I'm going to be giving away a copy of Kids on Bikes here in a little bit. So there you go.
I will say, the gatekeeper of money, like, I'm not going to say that I'm above pirating. When I was in college, I did do it. Now, as an adult, I purchase all my books.
I will say that if I am going against pirating on this channel. I definitely went through that phase. I went through, like, I watched the movie Hackers, and I specifically with the music industry, I was like, record labels are stealing all this money anyways, pirate all the things. I don't believe that anymore. Because I'm a content creator now myself, and even more than that, like, I have friends who, like, have been really screwed over by that. And I don't mean to, like, I'm not trying to call you out, Linda. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, don't worry. I'm much better about it now. Like, I've purchased all my books. Like, I'm really big on buying my books now. I have Spotify because I recognized what was happening to the music industry. And I was like, Spotify is my in-between.
I guess the way I like to think about it is this is our community, right? Like, as far as the TTRPG community, like, we are a part of it. You are a part of it. And if you're taking away from the people who are making these games possible, then you're taking away from yourself in a way. And it's hard to think about that, to think about, like, if I pirate this game today, if I go and take it off of a site, I'm not going to name a site because I don't want to endorse them, then I may be taking away a little bit of income from the person who won't be able to make their next game.
Yeah.
And that might be the game that you were going to love the most.
Yeah, there was actually a really cool Zero Punctuation on YouTube has been one of my favorite, like, YouTube series to watch. It's about video game reviews. He does a wonderful job. It is definitely not a little kid friendly thing, so keep that in mind. But Zero Punctuation has this recent series called Slightly Civil War, and he did one on piracy in the video game industry. and they follow it up with a podcast afterwards where they spend about 40 minutes talking about piracy in the video game industry and like how does it impact. And obviously, I feel like it's going to impact the little guy the most.
Yeah,
Like,
right?
decimate small creators.
Yeah.
The big creators, you might think like, oh, well, Dungeons and Dragons is owned by Wizards of the Coast and they're this big, massive conglomerate. You're right, but their conglomerate branches down to the little guy.
I looked up a
And,
thing that reminds me, and of course, Wizards, I agree, they have plenty of money, but it's interesting to think that even them, they are one of Hasbro's lowest, like, grossing properties.
oh,
Like,
yeah.
Hasbro makes more money off of Power Rangers than they do D&D, than Wizards of the Coast.
You have to remember, Hasbro owns Barbie. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure they own Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I think so.
Most McDonald's toys are done with Hasbro. Like, they Wizards of the Coast is probably just the largest thorn in their side. The fact that they still keep them around blows my mind some days.
There's just enough people for them to not
Yeah.
dump Wizards. Wizards, I think,
Yeah.
Wizards will survive. They're not in danger.
Oh, yeah, no.
Let's clarify that. But
Yeah.
I say this to say that even the largest power player in our TTRPG community is one of the smallest properties of the company that owns them.
Don't worry. Probably only 1% of Americans play that game. But when
Yeah.
you think about it, that's still 3.5 million people.
Yeah, but when you think about that, then you turn to like Metal Weave Games and properties like Dungeons and Doggies,
Oh my gosh, we have
like
all of them.
these companies that have to do Kickstarters to make it. Like,
Ah.
if I start pirating the Dungeons and Doggies PDF, I'm killing that company, and then we don't
Yeah.
get another really cool Kickstarter. Just saying.
Yeah. As I look over, we actually have 2 sets of Dungeons and Doggies sitting next to us.
Yeah. That's another one I'll call out. Metal Weave Games is a great company. They put out a lot of stuff that is affordable. If you're looking into that, they have a great book right now that you'd be really interested in, Linda, called The Baby Bestiary.
Already bought it.
Of course you did. I should have known better.
Yeah, no, we have a small addiction to Kickstarter in this household. I don't know how many Kickstarters we have funded right now and are waiting on. I'm not sure I want to know.
My last one was the Roll App. I'm going to switch from Roll20 to Roll App, I think.
Oh man, it's oof. We made a special bank account for Kickstarters where we move the money over into that account and pay with that card so that we don't have to worry about like, oh, we forgot that we backed this thing 6 months from now and it's just now pulling.
Yeah.
Because we've had that happen.
Oh, man.
And of course, my husband and I both play, so we will buy 2 of practically everything so that we have one for home and then I have one for the kids at school.
That's
So,
cool. I
yeah.
will throw one more thing in before I get back to my shutting up. A lot of these games, if you can't afford them, have Ashcan and or SRD rulebooks that are free. So they release like a thinned out version of their game that is just the core mechanics without all the extra that you can download for free and use. Dungeons and Dragons has the SRD, it's the standard rules document. It has the basic species and classes and the basic rules. Kids on Bikes has their Ashcan rulebook that's free, that's just the rules, so you can play it for free. And then when you're ready to get more into it, when you know you like it, you can buy it. So that's another way to get around the money issue. Look up to see if the game you want to try has a thinned out basic rules PDF. A lot of them will.
The other fun one, talk to your local library. You would be amazed how many of them have these books, and if they don't have them, we'll purchase them for the library. And if you're really feeling frisky, talk to your local library about running your own game because they would love to have you. And they get funding for these things and they will help you put together these kinds of campaigns and stuff. And a lot of times your local librarian has probably been playing role-play games since before you were born. So they will gladly help you put together a game, especially if you are on the younger side of things. Like, I think my local library, like, that's where I got really into manga. because when I was a kid, I loved manga. And my local library was like, yeah, we have a couple of them. And because I'd like read through every book that the library had, our librarians started buying more of them. And by the time I left for college, we had an incredibly healthy selection of manga.
That's awesome.
And because that's how they purchase books for libraries, is based on what people read. So if you're reading more of those role play games, they're gonna buy more role play games.
There we go. Wonderful. Yeah, I just had to get off on that tangent because I agree
Oh,
with the
yeah.
paywall issue, but I just
Yeah,
wanted to throw in
don't
there
go
that
stealing
some
things. Like
things about
that's
that.
so bad.
Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back to watching this presentation.
No, you're good. Like, and obviously we've talked about all of these, but like there are some obvious benefits to role play games. You just from the basic things of like it's fun. You get to meet people. Like that's literally how I met you, was through D&D. Um, like you meet new people and you do new things, especially when I was in college. I met almost all of my friends in college through a Dungeons and Dragons game that was being hosted in our school commons. Like somebody put up a sign that was like, I'm a DM, I'm looking for players, and a bunch of people showed up and I became friends with all of them. But it encourages teamwork, and I feel like a lot of times in the nerd circles, you get a lot of loners. You get a lot of people who feel like they don't belong anywhere. And this might be their first chance to really work with a team and work with other people and build up those social skills. And I'm not saying that all nerds are loners, but I'm saying that enough of them are that the stereotype exists. So, how do we fix that? How do we break that stereotype? We build those skills. We work on them. We work on teamwork. We look at strategy. We get those awesome creativity exercises. That's all Dungeons and Dragons is. That's all any role play game is just being creative. You're given a blank sheet of paper and you've got to come up with everything on those 3 pages. You've got to make a life, a very intricate life. Like, and you can have the most simple, I am fighter boy off to fighting big war, to I'm a bard that likes to, learn about this one particular strand of history, or I collect only these types of instruments and I want to master this one rare type of flute, to I'm a botanist interested in learning about all the different types of plants in the world. I'm going to build a catalog of literally every plant ever. And I feel like it's a great way to just take in all the different readings that we learn about in an academic sense and apply them to something that's really fun. And there's actually been a ton of research. Something that I don't think a lot of people realize is that role play games are heavily researched, to the point where this isn't like, oh, somebody wrote about this in Times. These are peer-reviewed, published articles. People have done dissertations on the benefits of role-play games since the 90s. Because it became popular in the 70s, the kids who grew up with it in the 70s and 80s ended up going to college in the 90s and the 80s and 90s and started publishing on it extensively in the 90s and 2000s. And now that we're 20 years out from that, we're starting to see the additional peer reviewed that are coming out of this. And we've got decades of research on the benefits of role play games. And now they're actually being used in therapeutic senses. There are role play games that are entirely designed for therapeutical use only.
I mean, interestingly, I get to humble brag for a minute. We're instances of that now, Linda. You're about to finish grad school, and I
Yeah.
just finished, so we are now masters in our field who were heavily influenced by these games.
Oh man. One more year and then I'm done with grad school. But you went to grad school for English. I'm going to grad school for chemistry. Um,
Still.
yes. I think one of the great things for me about role play games was being a DM. I've had to present in front of a lot of people, and that's really just me practicing teaching. Like any dungeon master, any game master, all you're doing is putting on a story for your players and you're teaching your players. And so it's been one of the most interesting education exercises for me, because I'm not teaching somebody a skill that necessarily has a right or a wrong answer. Everything is this gigantic shade of gray, and I get to help somebody navigate that. And in education, that's one of the most pure forms of teaching, is that I'm not trying to cram a fact into your brain. I'm trying to teach you how to interact with knowledge. And that's what role play games do, is they teach you how to interact with knowledge in this just one-on-one immersive environment.
What you just said is like the overall ethos of English and humanities education.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
Right.
So, like, we're not trying to make you study books just for the sake of knowing what happens in those books and in that literature. We are of the opinion and the belief that studying the writing of those the like beneficial writings of those past, the iconic writings of our history, and from people who've put a lot of thought into them, help you learn to think.
Yeah.
In a more diverse and open way. So it's interesting what you just described is what I'm trying to get students to do when I ask them to read a novel or a play.
Yeah, and it's because in science,
yeah.
as a chemistry teacher, I'm not. If you remember the pH scale and all the numbers and what every single one of them means when you're 47 years old, that's wonderful. I don't care if you still have the pH scale memorized when you become an adult. I do want you to know the basics of how does science interact with your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's true for every education. Like, the algebra teacher does not care if you remember
Mm-hmm.
y equals mx plus b, and the geometry teacher is not expecting you to use the Pythagorean theorem on your daily life. We want you to know how to work with angles, and we want you to understand that, like, things are on a linear progression, and like why sales are important, but also why, like, sometimes just because something it costs less doesn't mean that it's cheaper.
Same. I could not give one single shit if you can describe or if you can recite Caesar's speech in Shakespeare's play to me. But as an English teacher, I ask people to read stuff like that because it's a political rhetoric that they can take and expand their way of thinking about political rhetoric and about rhetoric in general. So what I just heard from this slide is that tabletop gaming is an educational vehicle in the same way that science or literature is.
Yeah.
Or that it can be.
And honestly, I would think that it would be hard to make it not educational.
Mm-hmm.
You would really have to just break it down so much, even if you did just a strictly war campaign, like a combat-based game where all you're doing is combat from like the start of the campaign to the end. Even in a combat-based campaign, you're still doing an insane amount of mental math and strategy.
I would go so far as well as you have to actively listen to the other players and the GM.
Yeah.
Active listening is a huge skill.
Oh my gosh, it's one of the skills that is on every single job out there, is how are you with active listening, or how are you at working in a team? What better way are you going to get that than in Dungeons and Dragons? Like, even in that campaign, if you've got 3 other people, you've got to work as a team. It's not just 3 people gladiator running through this thing. You're not all and you're off in your own different worlds. If you are, bless that DM. This is why we don't split the party.
There's many reasons we don't split the party. One is my sanity.
Exactly. I tell the players, like, are you sure you want to do that? Are you sure?
But yeah, that's really interesting to me, that we can almost look at this as like another vehicle for the humanities. That interests me that even in the STEM fields, which are often so alien to me. I did poorly in chemistry, sorry to tell you. It's interesting that even in those fields, the things I did well and remember from chemistry relate back to the humanities. The idea, one of the things I took like the most interest in chemistry was early on my professor, who was a genius. And I think a lot of my problems with that class was that he was a genius, and like he was like, why don't you understand the things I understand? But he said, just so you know, chemistry is just a philosophy that we base it off the basic tenet of I forget exactly what he said, but the idea that the universe is made up of these elements. And that's a
Yeah.
philosophical tenet, whereas physics is based off the philosophical tenet of Newton's three laws, and
Yeah.
biology is based off of these tenets. They're
What
philosophies as
life.
much as they are anything. And
Oh
that
yeah.
fascinated me, and that related back, because it related back to the humanities. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know,
And
that just really interests me.
I do find it fun when the sciences can make their way into role play games. Like,
Hmm.
I had a character that was an alchemist, and
Hmm.
she was fascinated with making new potions. And as I mean, what's an alchemist? It's an old-fashioned chemist. Like,
Hmm.
it is somebody who's going to collect different chemicals and mix them together and see how they work.
Do you ever low
And
key add chemistry lessons into your games?
no, yes. Uh,
If your players are in the chat, you might not want to say.
Uh, definitely some poison interactions. Like, I put insane amounts of research into the plants and poisons that are mentioned in my game. Like, I do very specifically, like, if we talk about a particular plant, I'm talking about that plant. I have done research on that plant and the medicinal properties of that plant.
I like to
And
imagine an instance in your game where like a student drinks a thing and you're like, that was this chemical makeup. You have three choices of reagent. Which one is the correct one to survive? A, B, C, or D?
just like, that's something that we as chemistry teachers want our kids to know is like, why don't we just go mixing chemicals willy-nilly? Because sometimes bad things happen and people die. Like, that's
Goodness.
that's something that happens in D&D. Like, well, they mixed these two potions and suddenly his heart grew 5 times but the rest of his body shrunk. What's going to happen? The heart's going to explode outside of his body and he's going to die almost instantly. Like, there are reactions, folks, consequences. But, and you have like, we have those underlying educational benefits, but there's obviously more concrete educational benefits. Like we talked about, you're reading source material, you're reading
Mm.
manuals, you're doing those active listening, all those note taking skills that we as teachers like to dream that it's like, ah, yes, our kids have learned to take notes because they've sat in my class and they've listened to me yammer. No, you get such better note taking skills in D&D. Like,
Oh, yeah. What
short.
was you would know what is that note-taking style that my science teachers made us use where you had to write like the subject and the huh?
Yeah, Cornell style, where you like
Oh
make
god.
and you have to put, yeah,
I
stand.
literally have not done Cornell notes since a high school science class cuz fuck
I
Cornell notes.
I have never done Cornell notes. They were not my thing. I had a history teacher in high school who did guided notes. I took his AP government class, was the first, or no, it was AP European history, was the first AP class I'd ever taken in my life. It was my sophomore year of high school. And he did guided notes. And so he would type up his lectures in advance and then just like cut out different words in them and hand them out. And then that allowed me the opportunity to like actually listen and pay attention. And then I
That's
jotted
awesome.
down some notes on the side. And that's been my note style since I've started teaching. I'm not going to lie, the prep work that goes into it is insane, but it's like, that's my note style for my class. But if I try to do that with my D&D campaign, I've gotten to the point where I just wing 90% of it. Like, I have a basic idea, but I'm not like, I know you prep for games way in advance. You've got like all this stuff planned out. I go in with like some blank post-it notes and a pencil, and I'm like, all right, let's just wing it, guys.
I have you
And
fooled. This is good.
we wing a lot, and I do a lot of improv. Um, and it was really bad in my last game. We can't the Ghostwise halflings that they came across had this unique ability that there was only ever one of them with a name ever in the history. Like, so if you were Casey the Ghostwise Halfling, you are literally the only Casey the Ghostwise Halfling who has ever existed, will ever exist. Names are a one-time use only thing. And that's really bad as a DM to kind of pigeonhole yourself like that, because the characters are always like, what's his name? Normally it's Bob, Steve, Dale, Jim. I've already used all those. Whoops. And so
That's pretty great.
it got real interesting. There were some times where it's like, well, I thought that was Chris. This is Chris with a K.
Goodness. Oh man.
But I mean, there's been tons of social benefits for D&D. Like, obviously we know about just like being around people makes you happier generally. Like, most people find enjoyment in being around other people and sharing in common like experiences. But there's been a recent push in the roleplay world for using roleplay in therapeutic use. And in fact, all of these are links to peer-reviewed journals that talk about the use of roleplay games for therapy use. And there is one being developed, and I cannot remember the name of it, but there is actually a system being developed right now that is strictly for use with licensed and trained therapists for teenagers battling depression and anxiety. And they've been using these games to get these kids to work through these scenarios, because if you're somebody who has such bad anxiety that you can't go to the store because you're afraid of how the clerk would interact with you, rather than taking that person to the store right off the bat, let's work through that in the safety of an office. And so these roleplay games are really heavily being looked at for therapeutic use. Like, imagine a world where there will be people who are, prescribed roleplay games. They're prescribed group therapy sessions where they sit down with a a therapeutical game master, and they do 2-hour sessions that are therapy, like true planned intentional therapy. We're gonna be to that point in the next 5 years.
That's really interesting.
Like, I'm like, that's so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it just blows my mind that that's what we're at. I can't wait to see that. And I know there was a big group of it in, I want to say it was Washington State, where they had an after-school program that was being run by a history teacher and a therapist doing role-play games with their kids, and they were intentionally placing those learning experiences for the students. And they also had the ability to make intentional selections of the students that were in the group.
Mm-hmm.
So they did target people for these games that they knew had autism, and they were using it for that therapy use. But it can be wonderful for working with students who are at risk due to diagnosed or even undiagnosed conditions. Because
you mentioned I don't know where I was going with that. In particular, I can imagine like character creation being an interesting chance to like get a view of a person's self-image as a therapist.
Because we were talking about earlier, teenagers can't write anything without putting themselves into it.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to put in their best or worst characteristics. There's always going to be some part of them in that character.
Mm-hmm.
And that's their opportunity to work through it. And for kids with depression and anxiety, or kids that are struggling with their identity, like, nobody really wants to talk about it, but yeah, if you're a transgender student, or you don't necessarily identify with parts of your personality that you've been forced to bring up for whatever reason, this is a wonderful opportunity for you to test out who you really want to be.
That's
and
interesting.
it doesn't have to be the person that you currently are. Like, maybe you envision the person that's a jock. Like, you have never been on the football team because you've been afraid to join the football team, but your dream is to be the jock. This is your opportunity. Test it out, man. Be the jock. Like, find out if you like that. Test out. Like, I've known people their characters have been the gender that they identify with, or they've tested out their new name that way.
That's interesting.
And,
Like to
and
have. That's really interesting. I love
yeah.
that.
And is it something that is every kid who plays a different gendered character than themselves transgender? Absolutely not. No, I played Patron in a campaign for a very long time. Patron was a guy. Patron was like dude bro, very very male character, your traditional soldier boy. And I'm not, like I've said before, like I'm quite happy in my identity. I'm lucky to say that I'm one of those people that I look the same that I feel. But I had fun playing a male character.
Mhm.
But for some people, that's their ability to test that out.
Mhm.
And
That's
it's
interesting.
back.
Do you see a world in which a new game is developed specifically like with therapy in mind?
Yes, it's already being tested actually in clinical trials.
Really?
Yeah, I was reading about it in, I want to say it was an article from the Journal of Psychology, but it's already being tested.
I would love to see what
There,
that looks like.
I know there are board game ones that are really popular where it's kind of in like a random encounter board game style, kind of like Call of Cthulhu board games, where you've got a bunch of different options, but it's a role play board game.
Uh-huh.
So those already exist, but they are testing out role play games for therapy. So I think this link will take you to how it's being used. And this one is an article about how it was used to treat somebody with schizophrenic personality disorder.
I'll
It
repost that in the chat. You can access this presentation chat
Yeah,
with the link above.
yeah. But it's like that is the one. Game to Grow, that's what it was called. Game to Grow and Critical Core, those are therapy based games. I knew I put it somewhere in here. Like, this is already happening. I want to see it make mainstream. Like, I need to see therapists available in the state of Tennessee and Kentucky. It's like, yeah, we work with teenagers using role play games. Like, let that be somebody's like push. I want that to happen.
I
Definitely,
kind of wish it was my field.
Right? Like basics, what do we need to do this? If you are a school and you're interested in starting this up, your first one, if you're a student, there's going to be a different path for you to take to start this club than if you were the teacher. If you're the teacher, congratulations, you've got half the battle done, because the biggest part of the battle of starting a club and any school is finding somebody who's an adult who will run it. If you're a student, you need to find that nerd teacher. They may be hiding, so pester all of them. Find the teacher who's willing to dedicate the time after school. And especially if you're like, hey, we're going to run the game ourselves, that's going to help you a lot. If you need a teacher to run the game for you, to be the DM, that's a good chunk of time. Like I do Tuesdays and Thursdays, I run the game. We spend 2 hours after school. I probably spend an hour to 2 hours each week prepping. So that's 6 hours a week that I spend on Dungeons and Dragons. I already teach several preps.
And to be clear, you do not get paid for that time that you spend at school, right? After
Yeah,
hours. Oh, you do?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so I'm lucky that I get paid through our grant. Because it's an after school program, we offer it through the after school programming grant. I get paid for the programming that I provide. That is not common in any way, shape, or form. I am the rare few. Most teachers who run this will not get paid, or if they do, they're going to get paid like a flat stipend by their school for running an after school program. Some schools might get lucky and throw like a couple $100 per year, but it's nothing of significance. But basic supplies that most things are going to need, you're going to need some kind of character sheet to run it on. Dice. I have found that purchasing dice, obviously you can go to your local game store and talk to them about supplies, and some of them will be kind enough to donate or at least give discounts. But I found you can buy dice on Wish for pretty cheap. Like a set of dice is about $2 on Wish versus $10 or $15 in a game store. If you're just starting, if you can support your local game store, you really should. That local game store is going to be there hopefully for the long run, and you want them to be there for the long run, so you need to purchase stuff from them in order for them to be there for the long run. But I also understand if you are a poor, broke college, high school student and you don't have $10 to spend on Chesic dice. So, and obviously dice are just like anything else. The more personalized you get, the more expensive they're going to be. I think we recently bought like dice with little ducks inside of them because they're really cute, and Roars needed a set of dice. So he has rubber ducky dice coming, and I want to say we spent like 20 or $30 on a set of dice. I've definitely spent more than that on a set of dice. Um, but you can also buy dice in bulk. That's what I do for my players is I buy the bulk sets on Amazon. It's like $30 for 20 sets. So I've done that. I've had good luck finding dice on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist.
Check out your friendly local game store as well. They won't
Yeah,
always be super affordable for some things.
yeah,
Dice, you can typically they will have like the nice like multicolored dice for like $10 to $20, but they will
yeah,
also have single colored dice that are a little more simple
yeah.
for $3 to $5.
That's where you want to start. Like,
Yeah,
if you've got the money, go for it. If you don't, start cheap and work your way up.
yeah.
Also, like bargain stores, we have some like bargain, like random goods stores. The one in town is called Give Me a Five.
I've
I've
definitely gotten like nice metal dice that give me a 5.
I've gotten crazy amounts of dice at Give Me a Five, particularly like on their opening day.
Mhm.
Uh, I got pounds of dice, and for $5 per item, I think I got 2 pounds of six-sided dice, D6s.
I got the
And
D&D starter set there one time.
yeah, I found D&D books. I think I want to say I want to say I got a player handbook there once.
My dice tray came from Gimme a 5. Hold on.
I think one of our dice trays did. We have also gotten like random supplies you wouldn't think that you would need for running a game, but make it more interesting. HDMI cords, 100-foot HDMI cord for $5. Like
This
random
dice
stuff.
tray came from Gimme a 5, which is a national store, and there's others like Dirt Cheap and
Dirt cheap is
Essex
one that I
and other
love.
ones where you can get stuff like that. But like, I found this super cool dice tray there the other day from Dark Silver Forge. It's super
Yeah,
nice.
we got a metal dice set there before, and metal
Yeah.
dice are usually 20, $30 a set.
Hmm.
Like
Sometimes you can find
check
great deals
out,
on just anywhere really. Wish.
yeah, like check out those weird stores. You would be amazed what you will find.
Hmm.
Like, and then obviously you can get source materials, but you're going to need whatever role play game you decide to go with. You need to get the source materials for that game. So if you're running Dungeons and Dragons, one, you need to pick which edition you want to run. You're probably going to run 5th edition, but who knows? Maybe you're going to go crazy and do 2nd edition. Go for it. But you're going to need whatever the source materials are. So that's where the cost I really think comes in. So if you pick a smaller game, you're going to have probably lower cost because you're not going to have as many books. And you may be able to save on buying PDFs. If you're doing more established games, you'll have better luck finding them.
Hello? We may have lost Linda. Hello? Linda? I think we lost Linda. Oh, okay. I'm sure we'll be back momentarily. In the meantime, I'm having trouble getting the giveaway to roll. I'm new to Nightbot, which is what I'm using it through. So we're going to do a keyword for our giveaway tonight. I'm sorry to change the rules on you, but I need to make sure that everyone is eligible, and right now it's only showing one eligible person. So let's make the keyword KOB. Just 3 letters. Like kids on bikes. KOB. So throw that in the chat and you'll be eligible for a copy of Kids on Bikes. Just like I am doing right now. Ah, we have a Linda. There we are.
Hey, look at that.
Hey, people can see you right now, just so you know. It reset all your stuff.
Yeah, you gotta love it.
There we go.
I don't know why. I have Spectrum, cough cough. And recently it has kicked me off almost every day. And it's really obnoxious. Where did you lose me? Where was I rambling?
You're in the same place. You're good.
Okay. But yeah, optional supplies, like get some way to do initiative tracker. You definitely want some kind of like, I don't know, a map. If you don't want to purchase an erasable map, like erasable maps are fantastic. If you don't want to buy one and you can get your hands on a projector and a whiteboard, I just project a map up onto the whiteboard. I'm also really terrible about using maps, or I just hand draw very terrible grids.
That's one of the benefits of playing at school.
Yes, it is. Like, not gonna lie, having a projector and a smartboard is super helpful. Because I can definitely do all of those pieces right there using my projector. I don't use minis, but I know a lot of people do. I think minis give a lot of aesthetic to the game, and they help with those people who need to visualize. I don't like carrying around minis because it takes up more space, and I've already got so much stuff in my classroom that space is a hot commodity. So we don't use minis. Fun thing, if you are interested in doing minis on Kickstarter right now, there are 2-dimensional minis, and they're called skinny minis. And you can buy skinny minis on Kickstarter. And I cannot remember who publishes them, but they are like game board style minis with the little pegs underneath them. And they stack super well. They don't take up a lot of space. They're also very inexpensive.
I think I've seen places where you can download similar things like for free.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you can download them on cardstock and just bend the bottom of them, and ta-da! Download, print onto cardstock, and go.
I'll see if I can find the free version of those I've seen. I feel like there's a Reddit where you can get stuff like that free of charge.
Dungeon in a Box. Oh, Dungeon in a Box. You can also get minis in groups on Dungeon in a Box, as my husband just reminded me. It's a great way if you want to start, because they send you everything you need for the dungeon, including the minis. And it's a monthly subscription thing. So like, if that's what your D&D club wants to do, is like you use your dues for your D&D club to purchase Dungeon in a Box, all your kids can like do Dungeon in a Box, and you can dramatically reduce the price on that.
Do your kids pay dues, Linda?
No, my kids do not pay dues because it's paid for the school. But some schools do charge dues or fees for being in clubs. Ours is completely free.
Wonderful. If that's something your students can do, or you as a student can do, that's definitely an option for making sure your club has funding.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of schools, like, I remember when I was in high school, I paid dues for every club I was in, and we just did fundraisers. Like, there's a gajillion fundraisers you can do. Do D&D themed bake sales.
I'd buy some critical cookies from a kid.
Yeah, like there are going to be some wonderful things that come out of a D&D themed bake sale. That kind of makes me want to do a D&D themed bake sale now. Maybe not in the Corona world. Maybe not in the Corona world, but
the cupcakes are mimics. Some beholder snickerdoodles, maybe.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. I'm thinking of like how many, like, can I actually make cake pops that are D20s.
Ooh.
I bet I can get molds for that.
I laugh, the cupcake laughs, I stab the cupcake.
We crit, it's a great day.
Goodness. I like this plan.
I don't think I need to go over like what happens in a role-play game session. That's definitely for my when I'm presenting this to people who've never done role-play games before. We have to go over like what actually happens in a role-play game, because they're like, I know what happens in a role-play game. You murder goblins. I'm like, whoa. Time out. I've had many a session that had no combat at all role play for 2 hours. Like, just because we're playing a role play game does not mean that we've all got swords out and we're just slaughtering everything.
Most
It's not.
definitely. My favorite games have been ones where there was no combat.
And don't get me wrong, like I definitely enjoy a good combat session. I think it
Oh,
keeps
sure.
the pace up. But I think like the best things that happen in games aren't the combat, they're what happened after the combat.
Hmm.
Like it's just that's me. Like I like the story that goes into it. But obviously, I think one of the big things that keeps a lot of people from doing D&D at the high school level is the problems that come with it. Um like you're working with teenagers. I don't know if you know this, but teenagers come with drama. Lots of it. And that's a problem and you got to deal with it. Like if you are the dungeon master or the game master or whatever you want to call yourself, um like you're in charge of these minions. You're gonna have to figure it out. And obviously some of the drama is just like I have other commitments and I can't always make it a game. And some of the drama is, well, I don't like how this player did this. And it will bleed over. Like players will get attached to their characters. I get super attached to my characters. It bleeds over. And so it can be a problem, and it's just you just got to deal with people. Just remember that your players are people, and that will solve 90% of your problems. You just treat them like people. um Setting up a game can be overwhelming. Like I run homebrew games. Casey, I know you run homebrew games. Like there are a lot of times where it can seem daunting to build a universe. My characters, I think, figured out that my universe was an odd took took themes from Disney worlds. They figured out pretty quick that one of the early characters was kind of Elsa.
Yeah.
um
Real quick,
I was
let me break real quick to just say I finally got the giveaway to work. Congratulations to Lightning Soups. You have won a copy of Kids on Bikes. Message me after the stream and we'll get that to you.
Woo! Go
Woo!
Lightning Soups. I know you. um but like that's such a thing that people are like, oh my gosh, I have to build my own world. No, you don't. There are so many pre-made campaigns. You can buy a pre-made campaign or get one for free offline. When I first got started in it, I did one-page dungeons, and I've put the link on here somewhere, but they are exactly what they sound like: one-page dungeon crawls, and everything you need is on that one sheet of paper.
I have
Other
a
than
few
like
books
you need
like
to go
that. Those are
find
great.
the sources.
I
They're
have
wonderful.
I have one as well that is a big book of caves that are one-page maps for different cave structures that I really like.
Yeah, these are like one-page campaign ideas, and they're meant to be one shots. They take 2 or 3 hours. And the I've printed what I've done is I went through and printed like 20 of them, and then got the like wrote down all the page numbers for the different creatures that they would need, so that they know like, oh, I need to go put sticky notes on these creatures in the monster manual if I run it. And then I write down the information for the items onto like index cards, and I've got them binder clipped inside of a binder in my classroom, so that if a kid wants to run a campaign but has never done it before, they could do that. We had this idea last year that we were going to do one shot Wednesdays to encourage the kids to DM more, and then Wednesdays ended up being faculty meeting days for me. So that took half of my Wednesdays. And when you've only got 2 hours, like most D&D campaigns last 4 to 6, so it, your one shot takes 3. And it it was definitely I want to make it better this next school year, assuming Corona
Nice.
doesn't kill everything.
I see people in the chat saying that they're some of the D&D kids. Feel free to
Yes.
share your favorite D&D club memories, and we'll shout them out on the stream too.
Yes,
I'm
they
curious,
are.
like Linda, her memories may be different than you guys's, and I'm really curious.
Yeah, my little minions came along.
Yeah, I got Lightning Soups and Nuclear Blade 0410. The pseudo drag. Lightning Soups says the pseudo dragons. What does this mean?
Oh, so my first time being a DM, they started their campaign in Adventurers R Us, which was like this introductory dungeon, so that I could figure out what the heck I was doing, they could figure out what the heck they were doing. This was literally the first time we had ever done this, and I gave them pseudo dragons. I was like, every player needs a pet. So one of the rooms in this little dungeon had a tree that had grown through the wall of the cave, broken out, and there was a nest of different little baby pseudo dragons that just like flew around in there. They were all colored and they had these minor abilities, and I thought they were minor and they were not. And so they got these pseudo dragons, Clem and Milk, and I never thought anything of it. Clem was a green pseudo dragon who had poison that like on contact would like numb your body and it felt a little tingly, kind of like if you got like a Novocaine shot. And then Milk was a gold pseudo dragon whose tail could shapeshift. And I was like, it's essentially an unbreakable lockpick. And that's all I thought about when I made these characters. We did one-shots that summer, and I forgot that they had the pseudo dragons, and they came into this world of, oh my gosh, the dwindlings. And they were these creatures that were smaller than grains of rice, and they existed in a little microbiome outside of a wizarding school. They had been shrunk down like eons ago, and this wizarding student made this incredibly powerful shrinking potion, and it made him the size of a dwindling. And he finds his entire village, and they didn't have a lot of magic, and so he comes in and like takes over this village and convinces everybody that he's a god. And at the end of this, they end up getting these permanent growth potions, and they permanently grew their pseudo dragons that I'd completely forgotten about. And Milk and Clem became the size of wormlings. And so here are these like level 10-ish characters that now had very powerful, legitimate pets that were near dragons that became very much Hallmark characters.
Dragon Riders time. I love it.
It was insane. Like Milk and Clem became like powerhouses that just took over. Like the final boss fight, I think Milk ended up doing the final kill in the big boss fight at the end, like just slaughters everything. I was just like, these were really OP. Like, I'm learning my lesson.
I used to struggle with that. I've made players very strong very quickly by accident.
This was definitely by accident.
In retrospect, I don't regret it because it was super fun.
Oh yeah, that's definitely one of the fun things. Is like there's this book of rules. The best part is when you forget that it exists.
Yeah. Sometimes the Gods Amongst Humans characters are the best.
Oh, that was the same group that like that summer we did all one-shots because we didn't know who was gonna be there. And they did a somewhat pre-con one-shot where they went through a dungeon, and it was out of the tomes, the 5th edition's tomes one, and I can't remember what it's called. Not Yawgmoths. Yawning Portal. There we go. So I got one of the ones out of there, and I couldn't pronounce the god's name, so I named him Toma-chan. And they went through this big dungeon for Toma-chan, and the entire time the party was in there, they cleaned the entire dungeon. Like, this is a decrepit, left behind, like destroyed dungeon that's been forgotten about for eons, and they went through and just immaculately polished and cleaned this entire dungeon. They were like, no, this belonged to a god that was once of really big importance, like he deserves to have some respect. And they ended up reviving this deity, and he's become a long-standing part of the campaign, both the first and second campaign, because like they went through and they were like, yeah, we really respect that this deity existed. And I was like, this is a one shot. I never expected this to go anywhere. But now Tomachan shows up all the time and like became a very, very big portion of the campaign moving forward because of what happened in a little one shot that was like, this is supposed to be a throwaway nothing game. Oh, how I was wrong.
Wonderful. Awesome.
Like there's and oh, there it is. The free one shots is that link right there.
There you go.
Like if you're starting a club, obviously, so Wizards has a locator. You can type in your location, your zip code, and it'll show you all of the registered game stores within 50 miles of you. And I highly recommend that you do that if you have no idea what you're doing, because that'll show you the game stores that you can then go partner with and find people. And like just get help, get word of mouth for your club, get word of mouth for whatever it is that you're doing. Somebody there might have books that they want to donate to you or let you borrow. You never know. And then there are some great Facebook groups. I'm on both of these. I use them pretty often for just ideas or how to deal with this. There are a lot of teachers who run D&D clubs. So if you post on there like, I'm a teacher, you would be amazed the amount of teachers that are like, yes, I'm a teacher too. I have that same problem. This is how I fixed it.
My wife has one of those for a dance teacher Facebook group that's all dance teachers, and she loves it. It's so helpful for her.
Oh, I run one for chemistry teachers and I run one for AP physics teachers. And then I'm on probably a dozen different teaching ones. Like if it's a thing that you do, there's a Facebook group for it.
Rule
and
48 of the internet. Probably.
Yeah. Like they're super helpful, but there are some really common misconceptions that I think come up, and these are the ones that you're going to have to battle with whomever you're trying to start this club. These are the ones you're going to have to battle them. The biggest ones are only guys play role play games. No. Casey, boys are not the only ones that play role play games.
Are you sure my past D&D groups that may have 2 dudes in them say otherwise?
Oh yeah, right. Like, I mean, the campaign I'm in right now, there's a female DM and then there's the 2 girls in it. There's the campaign I run for the school. I'd say our club is a pretty good 50-50 split, boys and girls. Don't get me wrong, I've been in games where I've been the only female there. But we know that with recent statistics, 40% of players are women. Now, does that mean that women are still outnumbered? Yes. But it's not only like white nerdy guys in their 20s, pimple covered faces, eating Doritos and drinking Mountain Dew in their mom's basement. Like, we have moved past that. We have evolved. People now play in the kitchen where there's sunlight coming in through the window. And I think like that's a big misconception, is like this will just be a bunch of boys playing this game. Like there are a lot of girls that play these games. There's a lot of minorities that play these games. Like it's not just a bunch of white kids getting together. This is really popular with humans, all humans. Maybe some aliens too. We don't know.
There's a great live stream of Stephen Colbert playing with Matt Mercer from Critical Role for Red Nose Day last year. It was like a one player campaign, one shot. Where Matt DM'd Stephen Colbert for Red Nose Day, and it was great.
I think it's funny how many people are like, no, but only nerds play it. Then Vin Diesel is a super nerd because he loves.
He was on an episode of Celebrity D&D, and it was really good. Another big one here lately has been Joe Manganiello from like he was in the. He's in a lot of action movies. I'm not an action movie guy.
I recognize that name.
He was in Rampage, I know. And he's done a lot of movies with like The Rock. But he started. Yeah, Drew says he's putting his Doritos away. Fine. But no, Joe Manganiello is like an action star, and he's like this big dude known for like his presence in like the bodybuilding community and being kind of like a male icon in Hollywood. And dude, like his basement is a legit like Gary Gygax museum, and he's got like Gary's chair that he sits in when he DMs, and he's got like models of dragons all over the room, and like a mind flayer head mounted on a plaque, and like all these rare collectibles and stuff, and it's his home
Oh,
dungeon.
yeah.
And Manganilla's like nerd and proud. And then he started a clothing line called Death Saves that's like awesome 90s and 80s inspired D&D themed clothing, like as legit fashion. And he's friends with the guys from Critical Role, and he's talked about it on Colbert and on the news. He's been a really interesting like thought experiment in like being like legit cool. Same as Vin Diesel,
Yeah.
except Manganilla's even more vocal. I did not know that my hero, Robin Williams, was a D&D fan, and I'm surprised I didn't know this.
He loved like all roleplay games, and a lot of them use it as method acting. Like a lot of them use roleplay games for acting practice, and it's really popular in acting schools to do roleplay games.
I can definitely see that. I'll say that I'm not surprised about Robin Williams. I just didn't know that he in particular.
Yeah, I think it's really fun. Like, I'll talk to people like, yeah, I do this. Like, I'm in grad school right now. I mentioned that I was doing this podcast with the people I was doing a group project with, and I like, of the 3 other people in the group, 2 of them were like, yeah, we also run the D&D club at our school. And I mean, this is just a random sampling of students from a chemistry grad program, but so many of them play D&D or played D&D in college, or, you know, run the club for their school and stuff. It's like, there are a lot of people that are super into this. They just don't know.
Yeah. Interestingly, that's what the next episode, weekend after next, is going to be talking about. I have my friend Dylan Davis, who is an improv comic and stand-up comic in Nashville, and we're going to be talking about the ties in with theater and acting and improv comedy. So that's interesting that you bring that up.
Yeah. Another thing that I've seen this one, when I first started the club, I did actually get this one, was, well, the kids who are in this club are going to be ostracized for being in this club. One, if your administration gives you that line, the next words out of your mouth should be, then you need to handle that. Like, at no point should it be acceptable in your school to just say, well, we can't do this because the kids who do it will be ostracized. That's feeding into the problem, period.
And
like, that
should
never be acceptable.
And I think it says something in particular at your school, from what you've told me, that's a solid, like...
That's a solid concern.
Yeah, but it's also like 12% of your student body in your club.
Exactly, right? It's really funny when people are like, well, they'll be bullied. And I'm like, then that's a bit, like, if your excuse for why we can't do something is, well, the kids who do it will be bullied, like, whoa, time out. We're all supposed to be against bullying.
Yeah.
You need to handle the bullying problem. Like, you don't fix a bully by taking the victim off the playground. You handle the bully.
Right.
Like,
I saw, and it was completely something else, but it said, like, if the town guard attacks one player, we all roll initiative. That's what comes to mind in that case.
Yeah, it's like, if the concern is that, well, this will encourage the bullies to bully the kids, then get rid of the bully. Like, handle the bully.
Is that getting better, Linda? Like, in my mind, like, I feel like nerd culture has gotten more, has gained more cultural momentum as of late with things like
it's definitely getting better.
Yeah.
I will say, it's really funny. So I'm also the after-school detention teacher. And so one of the things was, if you got after-school detention, it happened on the same day as D&D. And so these kids in after-school detention, part of their detention was sitting through 2 hours of D&D. And these are kids that are like, I don't want to be there with the nerds. I'm like, well, suffer, because you got in trouble, so you have to sit here and listen to them. And they would come out of it, they're like, this is fascinating. This is wonderful. And I'm like, this is why you're here, is so that you can see that these kids are normal people. And like, a lot of them would like, yeah, so I only have 1 more day of detention, but can I stick around more after that? I'm like, yeah, sure. And like, some of these kids got into roleplay games because they got into detention. And I was just like, yes, that is so pure.
That makes me happy. That I've had similar experiences with theater where we had students where like, hey, where like the football coach would be like, hey, the theater group, the theater kids need someone who can lift a dude. You have to go be in this play, and then they
Yeah,
come out
exactly.
loving theater, and that always like made me. Nuclear Blade says, "Yes, suffer with us, nerds."
I think it's I think it's really funny. Like I've had the more jock-ish kids come up to me, the kids that you're like, they wouldn't ever be interested in this. And they're like, oh yeah, no, I'm very into it, but I have football practice or I have basketball or baseball or whatever. And they just can't juggle the sports and the after school club. But they're like, yeah, I do this on the weekends with my friends. And they'd swap stories with me about it and stuff. Like they're totally into it. They just don't have the after
Yeah,
school time for it.
Elven
And
Lord,
I
I
love those.
yeah, Elven Lord says it's definitely become a thing in the military. That's really interesting to me because I don't know
It is
I don't know if
it
Elven
is
Lord is from our area, but we're in Clarksville, Tennessee / Hopkinsville, Kentucky area, which is right around
yeah.
Fort Campbell Military Base, home of the 101st Screaming Eagles. We're like a big military town, and I
Yeah.
have not been part of a group in a significant amount of time without at least 2 military people.
It's really funny, like the amount because think about it, you can pack up all the books
Mhm.
to take overseas and they fit inside your backpack.
The
Like
GM
it's
for
super
one of my
affordable.
games is currently deployed, and we're on hiatus right now just because he doesn't have enough time with like officer type duties to play to plan a game. But he still tunes into all of our streams, and we get to hang out. And he's told me like it's a great like coping mechanism for them when they're deployed.
Yeah. Magic's really popular too.
Mhm.
Like I know a lot of when I played Magic pretty heavily, we'd have players that because I went to college near Pensacola Naval Air Base, and what else is over there? Oh my gosh, I'm gonna forget the name of it. Eglin is over there, and Corey Station is right there, and then you have got Mobile. So big Navy area. A lot of people deploying with
Yeah,
the Navy,
yeah.
and the amount of players that they were like, yeah, I'm in the military and I still play Magic. Like,
Mhm.
there are a lot of nerds. We used to
Very
joke,
much.
when you're single in the military, you got to spend your money on something. So probably cars or nerds or video games. Like, if they don't have this like amazing car sitting outside, then they've either got a really good gaming system or they're into some kind of nerd hobby.
Yeah.
Like, can guarantee
I'm
they got
actually yeah. That's another episode we're gonna have in the future. By the way, I might want to get Wayne in on it too. Speaking of which, my friend who I don't want to say his name until we confirm it, but I have a friend who's currently deployed and is in Afghanistan, and we're hoping to do an episode of Cover to Cover because I'm helping him write his campaign setting as a publication to put online. And
nice.
we want to talk about it and talk about like his experiences with that. But
Yeah,
he's
I'll talk
currently
to them
in
about it.
Afghanistan, so it's going to be a lot of planning. But we hope we get
Yeah,
to do it.
that would
And
be a fun one.
I'd love to get Wayne in on that too, and make that a
Yeah.
multiple person conversation.
Yeah, for anybody listening who didn't catch, my husband Wayne is in the military and he plays heavily. Like he's been a nerd for longer than I've been a nerd. I came into contact with my nerd spirit later on in high school. He was born a nerd. His
I
parents owned a comic book shop at one point in their life.
I
Like
didn't know
he,
that.
yeah, his parents owned a comic book shop in Canyon City, Colorado. So he's been well endowed in the nerd community.
That's
Oh,
awesome. Yeah,
that's all I got.
cool.
I,
Man, that would be a great stream. I'll look forward to that one too. With Wayne, and we'll see what Riley's doing. I don't want to promise anything about him because he's got a lot going on right now.
yeah,
Uh,
I'd say.
but I'm really excited about that one. Being in a military town, there are other great charities for that, by the way. You might look into Operation Supply Drop if you are a military affiliated person or have a particular attachment to the military. Operation Supply Drop prepares care packages of video games and tabletop games to send to our armed forces who are deployed overseas.
Huh.
Great charity. Critical Role's sponsored them a few times. I love their work. So if you are one who is into the military, USO as well, for sure. Thank you, Elven Lord, for mentioning that. There are a lot of great charities to support our armed forces when they're off doing their jobs, and
Yeah.
it's serving our country. So support them too.
Yeah, like there's so many wonderful things that you can do with these kinds of like games. The wonderful thing is with role play games, the sky really is the limit. Like you can make them whatever you want them to be. Like if you want them to be this, they can take place anywhere, anytime. They can happen online. They can happen in person. They're so fluid. They're so versatile. There's so many options. So
And,
you really can do just about anything with it.
yeah,
And that's the
and to that end, like one of my big things lately has been showing the diversification of genres. I'm currently running a game on stream. We went live last night with our first session of Kids on Bikes, which is a supernatural sci-fi horror suspense mystery game, where our players are playing teenagers and or children. We have 3 16-year-olds and 2 8-year-olds as characters in a small town in North Dakota. In case they're in the chat, I'm not going to say what's going on yet. But they're playing it. The year is 1994, and the Magellan space probe has just gone missing from its orbit in Venus, and that's going to be a big part of the game. I'll say that much.
I love I love the versatility of them. Like one of them, we backed on Kickstarter is Nighty Nights. It is a campaign setting where you play as the toys that protect a child from the monsters under their bed.
I've seen that. That one's really cool too. I'm also particularly interested in doing a superhero one eventually. Like a comic book superhero. We're gonna do we're gonna do Masks, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game where you play young superheroes who are starting their first team. And it's more about the social interactions. This actually kind of goes along with some of the things we've been talking about. Powered by the Apocalypse games tend to be less about action and more about the interactions between players. That they're very socially minded games. And in Masks, your roles are for things like emotionally support your teammate, or be the leader type roles. Or play your role, or things like that, or exerting influence on a teammate that you've talked with a lot, or providing comfort. And it's about teenagers who are going through, like when we think of comic book heroes like the Teen Titans, like we don't think about the fact that these are like 13 to 15-year-old kids. And there's a lot of baggage that goes along with that, along with being a superhero. And Masks deals with some of that. More of the game takes place in between fights than in fights themselves. It's a really cool game.
I think that's a huge part of it. Is like, especially when you're learning these games, like nobody really cares about the big story arc is there. It's all the things that happen in between.
Exactly. And we had a couple people in the chat say that fights are most memorable when they have consequences to the story. And I think that's very true too. Like those are the things that we remember the most. But yeah, other games we're looking forward to. I want to do a game with Hero Kids, and Linda, I'm definitely inviting you for that one. Our Friday night playtest streams are going to be like one-shots and 3 to 4 session campaigns where we test a game out and then do a stream where we talk about what we liked and didn't like. And advice for people that want to run games of that sort.
I'm definitely into that because particularly now that I'm on summer, it's been really weird being at home. Like I'm normally like, this is the end of June. I should just now be feeling like, man, okay.
Yeah.
I'm starting to miss school. I've been out of it for a little bit. Like it's been a nice break, and now I'll kind of start to dip my toes back in the water of school. Because normally I just like crunch for July to do all my preps and stuff.
Yeah.
But I've been out since the middle of March. I haven't seen my minions in over 3 months now. Mm-hmm. And like it's made me miss them.
Well, Linda, if it helps, a lot of them are here for you tonight.
I know! They keep telling me. They've popped up on Discord to be like, hey, we're in the chat.
That's wonderful. So, that makes me happy.
I'm super happy.
I've had a lot of fun with this conversation. We need to do another one of these sometime soon.
Yes. We can I can talk about magic in schools. That's another fun one.
We definitely need to talk more about Magic too. We need to do a night where we just play Magic. Honestly,
Yes,
um,
I'm big on it. Let's play Commander. I've built some new decks since I've seen you
yeah,
last.
I'm building Ren and Siri cat dog deck for Megan.
Wayne wants to build Ren and Siri. I am working on Rug Omnath. Um, we do one of our big like date things. This shows you what kind of nerds we are. We do deck building challenges. We
Yeah.
set some kind of constraint and we build commander decks based on that. So like we did one where it was knights themed. It was who can build the better knights deck. We did one that was cats. Right now we did one recently that was best standard legal commander, which he built an amazing mono red burn out of that was just like it's really good and
Awesome.
really consistent. um we've like it's just been that's been our bonding thing is like do a challenge between the two of us and build this commander deck and see what we can come up with and like just test them out. It's been great. We sit at fast food restaurants and just
Mhm.
order our dinner, sit there for a couple hours, take up a booth. It's not like anybody like if you're sitting at a McDonald's, most people don't sit down at a
I've been there for
McDonald's.
that,
So,
and it helps that William gets to play.
yes, we go to play areas and let our kiddo rampage in the play area while we play Magic. It's wonderful because what else are you going to do while your kid's rampaging in the play area? You're
I
going to
want
play a game.
I want it to be known that I am making a toddler section in our new game room here at the house for
Yeah,
our friends of that persuasion.
I feel
Uh,
like that's one of the hardest things about doing gaming as a parent is
mhm.
that a lot of times other parents, like a lot of gamers, don't have kids,
Yeah,
and
for
most of our
for
gamers
live
are.
play streams where we're in person, should I set up a toddler cam in that section?
Oh boy, you would see him running through the house. Earlier today, my house was spotless. I spent several days decluttering the house and went through because Wayne was in the field for the military, and so my son was at our in-laws, and I I this morning I woke up to go to the restroom and the hallway area that goes to the bathroom was just cluttered with toys, and I'm like I can't see without my glasses on, and I foolishly left my bedroom without glasses. And so I'm like dodging landmines that are Iron Man and Ant Man and like a giant Buzz Lightyear laying on the ground. I'm just like, if I step on one of these, it's gonna hurt real bad.
Oh man. Well, we are at the 2 hour and 30 minute mark, so we're already 30 minutes over stream, which is a theme of this
Hey,
show. I always go over because I love talking with my friends. If
that's
you want to be
fun.
on this show, reach out to me, Lightning Soups. Hit me up in a private message. I'm gonna get you that free copy of that you won of Kids on Bikes. We're gonna be doing
Yeah,
Magic on here. We're gonna be doing Kids on Bikes on here. We're gonna be doing D&D on here. All sorts of fun stuff. Friday and Saturday are our main stream days. I'm probably gonna be streaming Maneater on PS4 as well because it's a great game where you play a bull shark and you just eat people. That's the
I
game.
so I watched the zero punctuation for that, and I considered purchasing it after
It
watching
is
the zero
so
punctuation for
good,
it.
Linda. It's so fun.
It is. He was like, you get to be a shark and you get to eat people and you get
Yes.
abilities for eating people. And I was just like, that sounds interesting.
But that's what
I
yeah. But that's our channel. That's what we do here at KCT92. We look at RPGs, we play them, we have fun, and we teach people how to play them. If you had fun tonight, one, hit follow. We are only 17 people away from getting our affiliate status and getting a subscribe button and getting custom emotes and all that fun stuff. So hit that follow button if you want to hear more of me and Linda talking about things and our other
yeah.
friends, and it'll be great. I put all these on YouTube as well. You can find me on YouTube at KCT92 as well. You can find me on Instagram at KCTW92 because KCT92 was taken, and Twitter at
Ooh,
KCT931 for the same reason. You can find all that information in the about as well. But we'll be back next week. I think we're taking a week off from Kids on Bikes because of holidays.
I was gonna say
So
next week is 4th of
yeah,
July, and this is a military town.
yeah.
We we go crazy.
I'm off, so I may stream some prep next week. Is what I'll do. I'm going to arrange a commander night for sure for Magic the Gathering
Yeah.
because that's a thing that a lot of people have been talking about, and I do love me some Magic. I think I'm gonna open up an M21 box on stream too. Me and my wife. That'll be
How about
fun.
we just draft an M21 box? Like, I would totally go in on drafting a
I
box.
have a bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh cards I found that I'm gonna go trade for M21 boxes, and
I
there
was
was a
about to
set
say,
of
if you
Game
want me
Boy
to play
Edition
Yu-Gi-Oh!
God cards, so I can get multiple boxes.
Oh,
Um,
Yu-Gi-Oh! I
yeah,
hate to be that person, but it's like I learned to play Yu-Gi-Oh! When I played Magic. I was like, I'll learn to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon. Yeah, I don't do Yu-Gi-Oh! I did learn to play Pokemon. I learned to play Yu-Gi-Oh! I learned to play Magic. I think I learned a bunch of other collectible card games at the same time. Trading card games, collectible card games, whatever you want to call them. Uh, I Magic is still my favorite. Like Magic
yeah.
was my first love.
I
It will
played
always be
Yu-Gi-Oh as a
there.
kid. I'm kind of out of it now, so I wanted to turn those cards into things I would use. I may get the
Yeah,
Theros book with it too, because we need to do a Theros book read through when it comes out on the stream as well.
we pre-ordered 2 copies of Theros. So for my kids that are hearing this, we will have Theros books at the school when school opens
Yeah,
back
I'm
up.
excited about that Oath of Heroism Paladin
Yes.
subclass, because that one's gonna be cool as hell.
Yeah,
Um,
I love just like all the new, like I love all the different things that you can do with paladins. Like I enjoyed playing a fighter in this last one. I've done a cleric before. Like magic classes are not really my thing. I'm playing a bard specifically because I've never done it before. So like I'm playing a bard right now, and I'm playing a rogue in my next campaign because I've never been a rogue. But I'm definitely the like paladin fighter is my that is my go-to
oh,
player.
I should mention I am making my own content now. I'm dipping my toes into the design field, and I've made my
Ooh.
first subclass, a monk subclass called Way of the Untamed Disciple, and I am
Yeah,
looking for
we tested that out,
playtesters.
didn't we?
Very briefly, I had a friend play it. I have since edited it quite a bit. The idea of the subclass is it's a monk that has taken inspiration from the natural world and from animals,
Yeah.
and these monks practice body modification to more closely emulate the animals that they venerate, and their styles are based off of it. So you spend key points to take animals or to take combat stances, such as Poison Dart Frog stance, which is a monk who has built up a tolerance to a certain kind of poison or venom, and then given themselves tattoos that secrete that poison or venom.
Yeah.
Or
The only content I make is education content because that's practically my life.
But I should pass along that and see if any of your players would like to playtest it for me. But I am going to be
Oh,
posting more custom content to Twitter. So if you're interested in trying any of my subclasses, my next one is a Moana-inspired ranger called the Path of the Wayfinder.
ooh,
Um,
that's fun. I
yeah.
always love Disney crossovers. Like I'm a sucker for a good Disney movie.
So it'll
If you
be all
haven't seen
about building
Onward,
boats and
you
finding
need
your way, will be the idea. It is
I
very much
feel
monk meets druid. In my home game, the idea is that these were monks that were banished from their monastery and took up residence with a druid circle, and they were heavily inspired by that. In our world of Run, is the idea. So yeah, they are monk meets druid. That's very true. And this ranger, like I said, it's heavily Moana inspired. I'm nowhere near done with it yet, but I know it's going to have things like it costs you half as much to build a boat, and you always know which way is north, and things like that. So it's going to
that's
be a
fun.
survival ranger. Like, you're not going to get a lot of combat bonuses, you're going to get bonuses to survival and navigation.
Yeah, so if you're doing a seafaring campaign.
Yeah, unfortunately, it will be in that regard pretty campaign specific. Not a lot of people will get a chance to play Path of the Wayfinder.
Well, easy, but that's okay. Like
Yeah.
it there's a use for those.
Mhm.
We have a lot of ghosts in our campaign currently. That's been the running theme is dealing with the afterlife.
Yeah.
So
There are spell swords, Nuclear Blade. That's a look in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. There is an
yeah.
option that you may be interested in. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a great one yet. I think it's not far away. there is in the Unearthed Arcana, there is a Psionic Knight that's a fighter subclass that may also interest you, that you can basically play a Jedi. Another one I'm interested in making, it's just an idea right now, but I'm playing with the idea of a Paladin subclass called the, I forgot what I was going to call it, like the Oath of the Prophet or something like that, with the idea being that you get like Bard flavored abilities, similar to how a Bard gives Bardic Inspiration. You would give your devotees, your followers. So this paladin collects followers and can give them buffs that has like a congregation die that they can give to their followers, or someone that's pledged allegiance to the same goal as this paladin. That's another idea I'm working with.
Just make the indestructible knights and call them the knights of St. Mead.
Kind of, yeah. It would very much be like a King Arthur inspired paladin, where like your goal is to collect a circle of knights to recruit people.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
The oath of following or something like that. I don't know yet. I don't have a good name. If you have a good name for me, let me know, because I'm lost on this one a little bit. But it's just an idea I'm mulling over. I hope to have a full publication of subclasses in the near future. Linda, is there anything else you want to shout out that you're up to lately? I see you've put a new Facebook group up for people to join with Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube to follow.
I made a Facebook page so that I could stop flooding my own personal page with all of my education stuff. So if you want to know more about chemistry or physics education, you can follow me on Facebook at Linda Detwiler Chem. I am going to make a Twitter and an Instagram. I have a YouTube page, but it is through my school account. And so to make my life a little bit easier, I'm just going to make a new email and make make a YouTube channel. But I present mostly on education topics. So normally I'm talking to teachers about how to backwards plan your classroom or differentiated instruction models and really nitpicky education topics. And so that's the bulk of my presentation travel. And so I make education content for that. So I'll be making my YouTube series will focus on that, but I definitely plan on having YouTube content I run a D&D club, and these are the things let's talk about how to work with the kids and how to get kids into your club and how to start this club and funding opportunities and things like that. So.
And let's do more of that here together as well, because I really enjoyed tonight. This was a fun conversation.
Yeah, I did too. I feel like we got through some good things.
Yeah. And let's look at Hero Kids sometime soon.
Yes, I'm going to be Hero Kids.
I'm going to start incorporating Tuesday night read-throughs where we're literally just reading through a game and reacting to it. Let's make that one of those sometime soon.
Heck yeah, sounds good.
But yeah, I think we've held people long enough. So I'm gonna say goodbye, but hit that follow button. Thank you for tuning in. And Linda, also thank you for your work as a teacher. I've done it. I've been a teacher in subbing, and I know that's different, but it has given me and community college, but that's given me an appreciation for what teachers go through and do, especially in some states where they are underfunded and underappreciated. And I cannot have more appreciation for what our educators do for our kids. So thank you so much for everything you do.
You're an educator. You teach too, remember?
I do.
You teach the big kids.
You send them my way. But yeah.
I want to. That's the goal, is to get them into higher education.
Yeah.
If that's what it needs to be.
And if you are out there, thank your teachers. Thank Linda and the rest of them, because they go through a lot to make sure that, and especially here lately. I am also a reporter. My day job, when I'm not teaching, is for a local news site. And Lord knows I've seen teachers going above and beyond to make sure their kids are okay right now. So thank your teachers. Even if you're not in school anymore, find them and let them know how they've helped you out. But yeah, I think that's about it. Follow button. Love you all. Play more games.